Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. To ensure social distancing measures are being met during this time, some members of council and city administration are attending the meeting today through video conferencing. I would like to remind those members who are attending through video conferencing of the following. Please ensure your video and camera and your microphone are turned off. If a member of council wishes to speak, they enter their name in the chat window in order to be placed in the speaking queue. When speaking, remember to unmute your microphone and enable your video camera, and all votes will be conducted with a recorded vote. Delegations will be attending the meeting today through teleconferencing to address council on the items on the agenda. Confirmation of the agenda. Can I have someone move a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Stadnichuk, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Findura, thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none. Carried. Communications. We have communications on item CR 21-30 from Gerard L. Durand, QC. I need a motion to receive and file CP 21-3. Thank you, Councillor Findura. Can I get a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Any opposed? Seeing none. Carried. Delegations. We will now hear delegations on CR 21-30. I would like to call upon Delegation Sarah Sangster. I'd ask you to please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any. You have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that members of Council may have for you. Ms. Sangster, are you available?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Please proceed.
Hi, so my name is Sarah Sangster. I live with my family at 2635 21st Avenue. So we're on the corner of 21st and Angus and on the same block as the proposed development. So we would have to share an alleyway with the proposed development. Thank you for having me, and thank you also for the public consultation that's occurred on the matter. I am grateful for the unanimous recommendation of the Planning Commission to deny the rezoning and the amendments to the bylaw that the developer requested. I see that you have many speakers, so I'm just going to speak to the issue that is most relevant to me, the alleyway and the increased traffic in the alley and the neighborhood if the development went forward. My own children learned to walk in the alley last summer. This summer we were planning that they would learn to use their trikes. But it isn't just me. The alley is used as an unofficial pathway for the residents of Lakeview and the south end of the city to get to Rotary Park. If you look at the city's pathways map, there is no official pathway, so citizens use the alleys in this way. Because my house faces 21st Avenue, the alley is actually to the side of my house, and I look out my dining room window on Saturday morning to see an almost never-ending stream of people. Older couples going for walks, people running with their dogs, younger families teaching their kids to ride their bikes. Now, of course, it is an alley, so we should expect that there will be cars in it. But what we didn't expect when we bought our home only 3 years ago and decided to raise our family here was that traffic in the alley would increase by 400%. So that's the thing. We would not have purchased this home if we thought it was possible that in a few years there would be a 3-story condo complex built down the way. We were very purposeful in buying our home in a quiet, residential, historic neighborhood. According to the existing bylaws, we expected that the neighborhood and that the block that we invested in would not change in such an incredibly drastic way as proposed by this development. In addition to making the alleyway unusable in the way that the neighborhood currently uses it, I'm concerned about the safety in terms of traffic. So just yesterday, I was in the alley, southbound, driving, turning east onto Hill Avenue. Another driver was on Hill, driving eastbound, but turning north into the alley. 2 vehicles don't fit side by side at any place in this very narrow alleyway. So the other driver had to wait in the street for me to leave, and while they were waiting, another car on Hill going east almost nearly didn't stop in time to not hit them. So with increased traffic entering the alley, these kinds of close calls will increase. When someone is coming off of Albert and into the alley, the situation will be much worse. Finally, in terms of what we can reasonably expect as a homeowner, we knew that when we bought our home, our neighbors might renovate, or that in some cases, an entire new home might be built on the block. and that we would have to deal with that amount of construction. It's part of living in a communal setting of a city. But according to the bylaws, we did not expect that we might have to live through construction of a condo complex on our block. That's significantly longer and more disruptive. I also just want to touch on the idea of investment. I think that there's some sympathy for the developer because of their investment in the property, but I would just like to encourage council to remember that myself and my neighbors have also invested a great deal financially and personally in this neighborhood, and so to consider our investment as well. So I want to thank the city for their public consultation, and I want to thank the Planning Commission, and I want to recommend that City Council continues with their suggestion to not approve the changes to the bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sangster. Any members have any questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, your comments today. I'd ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello?
One moment. It's Heritage. I'd like to call upon Delegation Jackie Schmidt, Heritage Regina. Introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any. You have 5 minutes to present to council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions. Thanks, Ms. Schmidt. Please proceed.
Hello, my name is Jackie Schmidt, and I represent Heritage Regina. Heritage Regina is strongly opposed to the application for rezoning and redeveloping the Cook property. The Cook residence is a designated municipal heritage property. The character-defining elements of the entire exterior of the Cook property are legally protected against demolition or significant change under the Heritage Property Act of Saskatchewan. The proposal in this instance does not meet that threshold. The character-defining elements of the home's entire exterior are integral to the heritage value of the home and are not limited to the east and north faces of the building. Alterations to a designated property must retain the property's heritage value. Any changes to the property must be consistent with the heritage designation bylaw and the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada. With respect to the rehabilitation guidelines of the standards and guidelines, the following alterations to the exterior form contravene 4 of these guidelines. The city has an obligation to protect the heritage properties in their community. The city's own heritage property designation criteria set standards for the city to follow. With these plans and policies in place to protect and conserve heritage property, the city needs to send back to the homeowners instructions to redesign their plans within the boundaries of the heritage designation, the city's heritage policies, and the bylaws. The redevelopment proposal does not support the conservation of a designated heritage property. The homeowners are proposing to retain only the front of the building facing Albert Street. Doing this will not just remove the gabled sunroom on the south side of the house and its built-up corner boards, the concrete foundation, the glass bottle bottoms installed on the west side of the house. It will destroy all of the rest of the home's exterior walls and all the character-defining elements that are a part of them. 65 to 75% of the home's exterior will be demolished. This goes against the standards and guidelines for conservation. We are concerned about the plan to relocate the east-facing and the north-facing portions of the home on the site. This is in opposition of 2 points of the Heritage Property Act and the standards and guidelines. The proposed demolition of the most of the facade and the relocation of the remaining structure contravene the protection legally granted to the Cook residents through its municipal heritage property designation. The rezoning proposal does not support the character of the Lakeview neighborhood or of the Albert Street corridor across from the legislative grounds. In addition, the proposal requires a generous decrease in the front and side yard setbacks that are characteristic of this historic neighborhood and would change the look of both Albert Street and Hill Avenue. The proposal seeks to close off a portion of the north driving and parking lane on Hill Avenue. Additional guest parking would have to move to streets west and south of the building, taking valuable space from the neighbors and negatively impacting the character of their streetscape. There are no special circumstances or special needs within the community that would justify approving a proposal that contravenes so many bylaws, that does not fit within the neighborhood, has a perceived injurious effect on the neighboring property owners, and would permanently change the streetscape of historic Albert Street. Municipal policies and bylaws regulate the actions of citizens. The rights of individual property owners must be measured against the rights of other members of the community. Because of the actions of individual property owners can have a major impact on the property values and the well-being of the neighbors and the broader community, property owners do not have a blanket right to do whatever they like with their property. How are the interests of the community being protected when people purchase a home in a neighborhood that is zoned as a residential detached? They have a reasonable expectation that the house next door will not suddenly change from a single family or duplex property to a 3-story multifamily condominium complex. Heritage Regina, as well as members of the community, are concerned that if the city allows the proposed redevelopment and rezoning to go ahead, other heritage properties could also be changed into developments that do not fit the character of their neighborhood. In the case of the Cook residence, there is too much at stake to allow the property owner developer to roll the dice and see if they can get around heritage protection policies and bylaws by repackaging demolition and redevelopment plans for the same property year after year. Heritage Regina urges the city to enforce the protections to which the Cook residence is legally entitled and deny the proposed applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Do any members have any questions? Councillor LeBlanc?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Ms. Schmidt, I've heard a question from several people in the neighborhood and the city, and I think you're the right one to pose it through. So there's some suggestion that on the whole, protecting heritage homes like this, which are very large, high-value homes, really amounts to just protecting homes for very wealthy people, people who can afford million-dollar homes and so on. Whereas if this was divvied up, people of more typical incomes could afford to live in this neighborhood, so that in some way by protecting homes like this, we're subsidizing rich folks to some extent, and that's distasteful in some way. I wonder if you can just respond to that general concern that by protecting a home like this, we're protecting million-dollar homes rather than enabling more modest accommodation for regular people to live in these historic neighborhoods. Thank you.
Ms. Schmidt?
Through you, Madam Chair. Designating a property is not based on the size of the property. Heritage designation goes specifically to the architectural and character-defining elements of the home and the people who live there. One of the beauties of Lakeview is that you have a wide range of different economic types who live in this neighborhood. You have very small wartime bungalows, and then you have very large character houses on Albert Street. So a municipally heritage designation does not necessarily apply to a larger home, but can also apply to a smaller house. So I don't believe that's applicable in this instance.
Yeah, thank you for that response. Maybe just one follow-up. I mean, it seems clear that the home as it is would cost more for a single family to maintain and live in than would one of the proposed condos if developed. And so it seems reasonable to think here you would have folks of a different income living in this house if it remains as is, rather than if it's turned into a condo. Would you agree with that, I suppose? And if you would agree with that, can you just speak a little bit about why that shouldn't be the overarching concern in the vote we're going to make today? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. I believe that these are higher end condos and that there would actually be condo fees that are paid for every month. And I think that we're making an assumption that someone, the caliber of person who lives in this house is like of a higher end economically. I'm not saying that they wouldn't not be, but I think that's a judgment you're making that you can't really qualify. And that owning one of these condo units is also going to be a very high-end property.
Great, thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Schmidt, I have two questions for you. The first is, can you tell us in just a few sentences what it means to every resident in this city to have heritage buildings like this one preserved?
Through you, Madam Chair. In living in a heritage property, which I have lived in Lakeview before, there's a sense of pride that you're contributing to your city by maintaining a part of its heritage, and that people drive by these neighborhoods like the Crescents, Cathedral, and Lakeview for that very reason, and it is an economic factor that brings people to the city. People drive down Albert Street to look at the beautiful houses in the legislative building, and they go on down Albert Street to have lunch at all the restaurants and like go to the shops.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. I have one further question. Suppose that Council today follows the recommendation of the Planning Commission. What kind of options are there for this house that would preserve the heritage character of the house and yet make it a viable living arrangement?
Through you, Madam Chair. There are several options that are available to the owner. There is the Laneway and Garden Suites pilot, or the program that is now a program. It was a pilot program, which is an opportunity to have an investment, a generating aspect of your property. You could also have a duplex in this property. So there's two different ways to have additional finances available through this property to help offset the cost of owning it.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Schmidt. I do have one question, which is something that I've heard, and I just want to hear what your response would be to this. Through the chair, how would you respond to the concern that if we don't approve this proposed development, that the property may fall into disrepair and ultimately get demolished?
Through you, Madam Chair. This property had an offer on it for someone to purchase it for $50,000 more than what the developer purchased it for. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. So we can't just assume that because someone is not getting their way with the development, that this property is going to fall into disrepair. You know, the fact that we have other people who want to purchase the property and bring it back to a single family dwelling, that we need to take that into consideration. And that we don't just sell off our heritage to a single person for their financial gain.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Seeing no more questions, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, Ms. Schmidt, and I'll ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Thank you.
I'd like to call upon delegation Dr. Tanya Doms. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you represent, if any. You have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of any members may have for you. Ms. Dom?
Hi there.
Doms?
Thank you very. Oh, can you hear me?
Can just fine. I was interrupting. Please proceed.
Thank you. So my name is Dr. Tanya Doms. I'm a professor of biochemistry at the University of Regina. I am here representing myself as a citizen and representing my family, including Douglas Casimel and my son Aidan Casimel. So thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Masters, and City Councillors for this opportunity. I wish to state that I support the recommendations brought to this meeting and completely oppose the proposed development of the Cookhouse property at 3160 Albert. I share the concerns of all my neighbors, including disruption of traffic flow, improper preservation of a heritage property, inappropriate requests to amend city bylaws, potential negative impacts on property values in the neighborhood, and issues associated with how project support was represented. In particular, a skew towards anonymous supporters rather than self-identified opponents with reasoned arguments. Therefore, I will mostly focus on some of the claims made during the proposal presentation. From my perspective, this proposal is a money grab, completely disrespecting heritage principles and neighborhood aesthetic, as evidenced by statements made during the presentation, such as a new marketable product in Regina. In my opinion, to adequately retain the heritage designation, this property should remain as a single-family dwelling or 2 units at most. I will defer to other presenters such as Jeannie Ma, Jackie Schmidt, and Ross Keats, who I expect to discuss the heritage-related issues in depth. During Leanne's presentation, the issue of back alley safety and increased traffic at Hill and Albert, an already challenging intersection, was completely downplayed, if not ignored. The 34 new parking spots proposed in the development would add more new cars than those associated with several existing blocks of this neighborhood. And this does not even account for visitors. As Sarah likely just pointed out, this is where our kids play, and in the case of my family, we take our preschooler for walks, mostly in the alleyways, where we also taught him to ride his bike. So safety is a huge concern with my family. The idea that the property is, and I quote, a gateway to the commercial sector on Hill is a complete misrepresentation, as there are 8 full-size residential blocks between the property and the strip mall and Hill Avenue. Just as ludicrous to me is the idea that this property is, I quote, right across the street from commercial buildings, since the buildings to which Leanne referred in his presentation are government buildings that are well on the other side of Memorial Way, which is 1 full street over in Wascaniff Park from Albert Street, further tucked away from Albert Street behind several rows of trees. In the presentation, Leanne would have us believe that lifting the house will be straightforward. However, according to the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, there is considerable risk in lifting such a complex home. I quote, in general, the larger the house and the more complex its design and shape, the more difficult it will be to lift on jacks. Multi-story houses are more difficult to stabilize during the lifting process, and as the dimensions and weight of the house increase, so do the required numbers of jacks and other pieces of equipment. Exterior wall coverings complicate the lifting process because they must either be removed or braced so that they will stay in place when the house is lifted. Houses with simple square or rectangular shapes are easier to lift than those complex ones, such as this property, especially if those pieces have separate foundations. So my question is, what happens if the heritage house is damaged beyond repair during the proposed lift? Will the developers then scrap it completely and we would lose a heritage property? There are other more sensible ways to fortify a structural foundation. In addition to the considerations above, in my opinion, the development as proposed is simply an eyesore that will detract from the declared heritage site, Albert Street, and the existing neighborhood. In Leanne's proposal, the aesthetic of Lakeview has not been matched. In conclusion, other than increased for which there are a plethora of other more suitable lots, I see absolutely no advantages to this development. I sincerely hope that you will vote to uphold the 3 recommendations of this special meeting, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Doms. Any questions from members for the delegation? Councillor Findura.
Good afternoon, and thank you for presenting. You mentioned there are other ways of underpinning or fixing the foundation. I'm not sure if you have some knowledge of someone with expertise within a residential area, or was it, how did you come up with that one?
So my understanding, well, first of all, and this is hearsay from, you can perhaps ask Ross Keith about this, but I understand that they have actually looked at the foundation of this house and that it doesn't require such drastic measures in order to stabilize it. And further, there are ways to brace basement foundations. Certainly, this is what we did at my former house. We had the option to lift the house or simply brace it, and my partner actually did a DIY project where he used C-spans to brace the basement and therefore fortify the structure of the basement without impacting the house itself.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, Dr. Doms. I'd ask that you please leave the meeting now.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to call upon Delegation Jeannie Ma, Architectural Heritage Society of Saskatchewan. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you are representing, if any. You have 5 minutes to present to Council, after which you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that the members of Council may have for you. Welcome, Ms. Ma.
Oh, I just have to turn this down. Hang on.
You're welcome.
I'm always surprised. Sorry. Okay. My name is Jeannie Ma, and today I'm speaking for the Architectural Heritage Society of Saskatchewan to firmly support Heritage Regina and the concerned Lakeview neighbours in the preservation of the historic cookhouse. We agree with the City of Regina that the cookhouse is a site of architectural, historical, cultural, and aesthetic value. We congratulate the City of Regina for designating the cookhouse as a municipal heritage property on October 29th, 2019. People live in Lakeview for a reason. They believe that well-preserved historic neighborhoods are important features of communities. They know that conservation and adaptive reuse of historic properties means livable neighborhoods and a good quality of life. Rehabilitation stimulates the local economy. It creates tax revenues and jobs. It retains craft knowledge and skills. It also reuses existing materials, reduces landfill, and limits the impact of new infrastructure on the city budget. In early domestic architecture in Regina, an exhibition at the Mackenzie Art Gallery in 1982, director Carol Phillips said, "Something ominous is happening. The unique sense of place that was Regina is disappearing, and looming in the future is an anonymous city where redevelopment is turning Regina from a smaller, beautiful city to the most ordinary of late 20th century developments." Now, almost 40 years later, with no additions to the heritage holding list since 1989, only losses, we must acknowledge that a sustainable city must respect and preserve the materials and the craftsmanship of our built environment. Our domestic neighborhoods are our history and our heritage. They give us joy, daily, visually, to deepen our love for our city. At the Regina Planning Commission, Mr. Lien said he purchased the cookhouse on the heritage holding list for demolition. He implied that the cookhouse is in disrepair, as did anonymous commentators on the city survey, who said that the house was, quote, run down. The photos in Appendix A from December 2019, when the former owners moved out, will show the exceptional craftsmanship of a spacious, immaculate, and well-maintained interior of the cookhouse. As Regina's Jackie Schmidt has said, the cookhouse, quote, was born from the labor and the love of woodworkers, stained glass artists, stonemasons, iron forgers, carpet weavers, boiler masters, and countless other craftsmen who continued age-old traditions and who practice what were cutting-edge technologies. One of the interesting aspects of the cookhouse is that the interior construction used wooden pegs instead of nails, a technique that is both functional and decorative and historic and unique. Please look at the interior space. Look at the detail. We no longer build houses like this. We should not demolish a well-built landmark heritage house. We should honor the memory of the Cooks, the Malones, and the Kramers, the families who made significant contributions to build the city of Regina. The Architectural Heritage Society of Saskatchewan firmly supports the Regina Planning Commission recommendation to deny the application to amend bylaw 2019-7, which would have allowed the removal of heritage status, to deny the application to rezone the property for a condo development of 16 dwelling units, and to deny the application to close a portion of Hill Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ma. Any questions for the delegation?
Of Regina. The Architectural Heritage Society.
Councillor Stadnichuk?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Through you, Mayor Masters. A question that, I'm just going to repeat a question that Councillor Hawkins asked Ms. Jackie Schmidt, and that was, how would you feel about the house not being maintained as a single-family dwelling, but perhaps divided into 2 or 3 units?
Well, from what I understand, the zoning bylaw is single dwelling or duplex. So if that is the bylaw, that's the bylaw.
Okay.
It would be fine.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So you mentioned a lot about the architectural design and also the interior of the home. I was very fortunate to see the interior of the home, and it is quite beautiful. But the heritage statement of significance, I do believe, focuses mostly on the exterior features.
Yes.
How do you feel any modification of the exterior would be warranted in any case, or it should be maintained as it is?
Well, as I guess, once again, the law says we can say nothing about the interior. You can see from the photos that the living room, a lot of the details are as they were. You can also see that the kitchen has been changed from its former state. So, as we heard about the glass house, when a realtor said the kitchen is, functionally obsolete. I mean, I don't quite know what that means. I would think a lot of our kitchens would be functionally obsolete in realtor terms, but a lot of us still live in these kitchens that are functionally obsolete. So we can do nothing about what the next owner, if there is one, will do with the interior. We can only hope that someone buys the house who respects the house as it is and works to restore it and to make it beautiful and livable and everything else.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ma.
Thank you.
I see no other questions. I'd like to thank you for your presentation, Ms. Ma, and I'll ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Thank you. Bye.
I would like to call upon delegation Dr. Meena Patel. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any, and you have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions members of Council may have for you. Good afternoon, Ms. Dr. Patel.
Hello. Yes, as you said, I'm Dr. Meena Patel, and I'm addressing the committee in support of the Cook House residence renovations. I feel that what Mr. Lean has put forward would give us a chance for more people to access the area that we're discussing here. In my own home, we have a mobility issue and we have a senior, and both of those people would be able to, with that renovation, be able to access an area which is pretty much not accessible for people in that situation. I also like the aesthetics of the proposal that he's made. It'll be appealing to a younger generation, and I feel that area needs to be opened up to a more diverse population than what it currently can cater to. I know there's concern about more traffic in the area, but that's true of all areas with with multiple family dwellings. I don't see that as a negative. I see it as growth and progress, and I do really like the proposal he's put forward.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Hawkins? No, I apologize. That was from previous. Thank you. Sorry
Yes,
about
I
that.
didn't put my name in. Thank you.
Apologies, sir. I see no questions for you, Dr. Patel. I'd like to thank you for your presentation and ask that you please leave the meeting.
Thank you.
I would like to call upon Delegation Ross Keith. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any. You have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions the members of Council may have for you. Good afternoon, Mr. Keith. Councillor Hawkins?
Good afternoon. Am I on?
No, I apologize. You are, sir. Please proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Masters and members of council.
Questions for you, Dr. Patel.
Just a minute here.
Thanks for your presentation.
I've got the interference from the machine here.
Thank you.
Hello. Am I on?
Mr. Keith, could you turn off the recording?
Okay.
Introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any.
Okay. Mayor
City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions the members of council may have for you. Good afternoon, Mr. Keith.
Good afternoon, Mayor Masters and members of council. Good afternoon. My name is Ross Keith. My wife Susan and I. Okay. Mayor Masters and members of council. I'm getting feedback here.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Mr. Keith, can you turn off the presentation? Like, I think you're watching it live, right?
Yeah, I'll shut that off.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Keith, could you turn off the recording?
Yep, I am. Sorry about that. I'll have that off in just a second. Okay. Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Mayor Masters, I hope my 5 minutes just starts now, so I haven't used it up. Mayor Masters and members of council, my name is Ross Keith. My wife Susan and I have lived in the Lakeview area for more than 40 years and have raised our family in this neighborhood. We believe that this neighborhood is unique in Regina and is an important asset not only to its residents but to the entire city. NIPOR Group is a real estate development company founded by Susan and I. NIPOR has extensive experience in heritage real estate development and has developed a great many heritage properties in Regina. We support the recommendation of the administration in the above matter for the following reasons. One, non-compliance with the standards and guidelines adopted by the City of Regina. The Cook House is a designated municipal heritage property. No alterations or additions to this building can be permitted which do not comply with the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic properties in Canada. These standards include the following provisions. Standard 2, conserve heritage value by adopting an approach calling for minimal intervention. Standard 11, make the new work physically and visually compatible with and subordinate to and distinguishable from the historic place. The administration's report speaks to the heritage analysis. Its conclusion is that alterations were dramatic, or proposed alterations were dramatic, not minimal, and compromised heritage value. We agree with the administration's conclusion. The proposed work is well outside what is acceptable under the standards and guidelines. In our opinion, as an experienced heritage real estate developer, it is blatantly outside the standards and guidelines. In fact, approval by the city of this proposal would be a serious embarrassment to Regina's well-regarded heritage program. Secondly, why did the city conduct a full application process when the proposal does not conform to heritage requirements? The city administration answers this question as follows. Any application for rezoning must follow the standard process and will ultimately be decided by council. It would not have been appropriate for the administration to reject the rezoning application based on concerns regarding heritage development. Property owners have an opportunity to apply for changes to bylaws that impact their property. We are property owners and agree that we have the right to apply to change any bylaw that affects our property. We also believe that we have the right to expect the city to conduct an efficient and effective evaluation process. The first step in the administration's evaluation should have been to direct the applicant to the first bylaw, which would require change. In this instance, that would be the heritage designation bylaw. The applicant should have been directed to apply to amend or rescind the heritage designation bylaw. If the administration's statement above is correct, it would mean that when the city receives a rezoning application in respect of a designated heritage property, the city would be obliged to process the heritage issues and process the application as if the property were a vacant lot. The inefficiency of such an approach is horrifying. A conservative estimate of the cost of unnecessary work required the city staff, the proponent, and affected properties would probably be $250,000. City staff did not have the resources to waste, nor should the proponent be shouldered with an unnecessary expense. Not to mention the cost and inconvenience of a special council meeting and a special planning commission meeting. Surely the city's legal department does not agree that the city is indeed confined in the straitjacket which the city has presently tailored for itself. Those of us affected by the city's present approach are imploring our mayor and councillors to find out if the administration is correct in respect of its intentions set out above. We should learn from this exercise, and the future should not consume everyone's time with development proposals on heritage sites until the heritage analysis has been conducted. The Cook House is a municipally designated heritage property. The city just recently went through a long and thorough process to make that determination. This proponent knew the property was on the heritage holding list when he purchased the property. He was unconditionally offered $50,000 more than he paid for the property by a buyer who was prepared to accept the heritage designation. He should have accepted that offer and moved on. He continues to suggest that his property rights have not been respected. The proponent, not the city, is the one who has the misunderstanding with respect to property rights. It is time for the city to make clear to the proponent the city has designated this property and will use the full authority which it possesses to ensure that the building is protected. We support the recommendations of the city administration and the planning commission and ask you to concur with their recommendation. I have included other comments in my submission in respect to physical issues and other concerns, and would be happy to respond to any questions council members may have. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, sir. Council, do we have any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Keith. I'll ask that you now leave the meeting.
Thank you.
I'd like to call upon Delegation Dr. Diana Zhang. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any. If you have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that members of Council may have for you. Good afternoon, Dr. Zhang.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and member of Council. My name is Diana Zhang. I moved to Regina 1990. And I live at 3248 Albert Street, just 3 houses down from the Cook House. I value the history of my house, its location towards Ghana Park, and the historic nature of Albert Street corridor. I have lived in Lakeville since 1997 and have owned 3 different houses during this time. I knew my current home was on the special list of historical buildings, but did not know what that meant or how I could apply for further destination and then tax incentives. Instead of that, I have invested time and money into the restoration of my property just because I value the architecture and historical of the Albert Street house, especially my house. During the 2014, and there were issues of mold and the foundation issues. I'm a medical doctor. I'm not a builder. I'm not constructor. But my personal experience with the historical house or old houses, if they have foundation issues or mold issues, there's no excuse not able to be repaired. So I invested my time and research and hired the right people and removed mold called the mediation process. Of course, the old building has asbestos. We got all that looked after, and foundation was repaired and working with the architect, Cliff Wins. So as building goes, there's no excuse have to turn this house down if it's repairable. So I'm now at beautiful home being totally restored, and I take an initiative to apply it to make this home into heritage through the city. Because at the time I was doing restoration, there are people approached me to turn the house down and divide it into 4 lots and make it into a smaller building, and the resale value will be greater. But I value the history of the house, and I don't want to destroy this beautiful home. So I love my home, and I do not want my neighborhood forever changed by introducing the kind of development with condos. I have many neighbors are concerned that this proposal will set a precedent that will destroy the heritage character of the Lakeview neighborhood and our street appearance. I respect the historical existence of all properties, not just my home. It is important for the city to preserve its own history for the future generation, to learn to be proud of its evolution. I'm concerned about this condo development project on our street and the historic Lakeview neighborhood. I do not think the project is appreciated for the site and the community. I thought the house was protected with heritage status and asked why the city is even considering a proposal to build a condo. It's not suitable. It's against the heritage destination of the home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zhang. Council, does anyone have any questions for the delegation? Councillor Stadnichuk?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Through you, Mayor Masters, a question for Dr. Zhang. Thank you so much for coming forward. It sounds like you really love your home and that you've done a lot of work. I also lived in what wasn't a historic home, but an older home in Cathedral, so I know that it does take a lot of work to repair foundations and that. I just wanted to clarify, you said you've applied for heritage status for your home. It doesn't have it now, it's on the holding list?
It is already granted as heritage building.
Oh, it is?
It is, yeah. After I finished the renovation, and I decided to keep this house as heritage building, so I take initiative. I applied through the city, and I spoke in the city council a few years ago.
So from your experience, through you, Mayor Masters, from your experience in repairing your home, you said that you did do the foundation work, removed any mold and asbestos. And what is the lifetime that the people who've worked on your foundation, what did they give the lifetime for your foundation? How many more years?
Well, it is all on piles now. From architect late Cliff Wins, he thinks it should last forever, for a long time anyways. Because as long as no earthquake, no explosion, and the great beam was put in, it should last, and the pile is really deep, and the wall is superly enhanced with all the great beam put in like a cooking bias. It was solid. Of course, we don't know how long the PVC lasts because all the plumbing changed to the PVC and all the electric cable changed. we don't know how long that lasts. As long as those last, I guess there shouldn't be any issues in terms of shifting cement, how long the cement lasts. It depending on the material deterioration in the nature. Other than that, the foundation is solid. We got engineer report before and after. Everything is in good condition right now.
Okay, thank you very much. No more questions.
Seeing no further questions, I thank you for your presentation today, Dr. Zhang. I'll ask that you leave the meeting now.
Thank you.
I would like to call upon Delegation Eugenia Maraglia. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any, and you have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions Council may have from you. Welcome.
Hi there. My name is Eugenia Maraglia, and I am representing no one but myself. So if I may begin, I've always dreamed of living in one of these beautiful houses on Albert Street, but thought of how much work it would take and the sheer cost of restoring one of these properties has always been completely out of reach. I would be very proud to be able to participate in the complete restoration and preservation of a historical house as it has been planned for 3160 Albert Street. Dividing the cost with multiple owners is the only way I see fit to allow more people to enjoy living in a historical house, with the headaches that go along with it already being taken care of by the developers. I've read the proposal, and I'm very pleased the plans include an addition that mimics the style of the Ledge building, therefore keeping in style of the surrounding properties on the stretch of Albert Street. I believe the developer has thought of everything: restoration of the original property, architecture that stays in line with the neighborhood, landscaping, parking for all of the units, and that's not street parking, even down to the waste disposal. In closing, I would like to say that I fully support this project and hope to one day be one of the owners of 3160 Albert Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maraglia. Any members of council have a question for the delegation? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for your presentation this afternoon, and I'll ask that you please leave the meeting.
Thank you very much for your time.
I would like to call upon Delegation Dan Turgeon. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any. You will have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you will have an opportunity to respond to any questions Council may have for you. Welcome, Mr. Turgeon.
Thank you, and thank you for hearing my thoughts on this matter today. Her Worship Sandra Masters and members of City Council, my name is Dan Turgeon. I am a resident of the Lakeview neighborhood. I live at 2737 Hill, which is on the corner of Hill and Ray, kind of kitty corner to the proposed project. And I guess I have just summarized a few points on my thoughts on the project. So I do support the proposed project for the redevelopment of the 3160 Albert Street. I believe that it will definitely offer lifetime Lakeview residents like myself a much-needed choice to stay in the neighborhood. I was quite looking forward to seeing the redevelopment there and the ability to have mixed condos in that space, as it may provide people who are in love with the Lakeview neighborhood be able to stay there as we retire and age. I believe that the project's mix of the heritage style is truly great for that corner. It preserves the heritage look of the cookhouse while adding the modern condos to the left of it, to adjacent it on the lot. I think it will fit in the neighborhood well. I like the mix of old and new in redeveloping projects. I think it will add some great history for years to come. I believe that, so what I've read in the package is that the project will substantially increase tax revenue on that property. And I think that's definitely good for the Lakeview neighborhood and the city as a whole. The projects will save the facade of the 3160 Albert Street home, with the exception of the sunroom that's to the south side that's kind of falling off the house currently. I believe it will kind of invigorate that corner property. Every day I drive by the property and walk by with my wife and dog, and bike by with my boys who are teenagers now, and it's been sad to see it kind of deteriorate over the last 10 years with the former owner, who kind of let the property go, really. The landscaping is not healthy. There's a bunch of dead trees in the property. And I believe that the project that Mr. Lean is proposing will really invigorate that corner. So I'm looking forward to seeing that positive change for the neighborhood. The project will bring additional residents to the neighborhood, the 16 condos that are proposed. I think that's great for the businesses down on Hill Avenue, the Hill Avenue Grocery, the coffee shop, the restaurant that's there. That's one of the things that my wife and I really truly love about the neighborhood, is that little bit of business that's there, and I think that the new residents will appreciate that as well. I guess my last point is that the city, at this point in time, I believe that the project will bring some investment into the city. It'll create employment for tradespeople, of which I'm one, and professionals in the development of the project. That is my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. I have Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and I do have a question for you. So this proposed development would require a number of adjustments to existing policy. So this is changes to the heritage designation bylaw, removing components that don't suit the planned development, amendments to the Regina zoning bylaw, and closure of a portion of the Hill Avenue right-of-way.
Yep.
So my question for you is, well, first, a concern that I have is about the precedent that this could set, that or just considering if there were regularly this many changes requested to our policies in order to accommodate development. I think that it has the potential to create a troubling precedent. So I am interested in your response to those concerns.
Okay. I guess as a homeowner, I don't have detailed legal response to those questions. I do understand the change to the right-of-way and to the heritage bylaw. And I guess I would be in favor of altering for this project, making the changes that are necessary just to see to see some development in the Lakeview neighborhood. I believe it falls in line with the city's neighborhood plan in densification and allowing basically what's mostly now a single-family neighborhood, other than a few multifamily things towards the opposite end of Hill. I feel that it's worth the council considering the proposed changes that are required to kind of make way for for a project which represents a significant investment and I think a beautification of Albert Street compared to the kind of dingy property that's there now that from what I've read is in a state of disrepair and maybe beyond individual homeowners ability to invest that much in the property.
Okay, my question was more about if developments regularly required this amount of amendments in order to proceed. Like, can you see how it's a red flag that in order for this development to proceed, there are several amendments required to existing city policy? I don't know if you have any further response, but that's the focus of what I was just seeing, if you had a reaction to that statement through Mayor Masters.
I guess I don't. I understand the things that have to happen as I was reading the package, all of the changes that were required, and I guess a project with the merits of this project might deserve some consideration from council to work on making the changes necessary for its approval.
Okay, thank you for your clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Councillor Stadnichuk?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Turgeon. I also saw the proposal of for this property. If that condo development alone, without it being attached to the cookhouse, if that condo development alone were built in an area that was zoned for multi-residential and was, still close to the Lakeview neighborhood, would that interest you? It seems that the condo development part is what you are interested in. So if it were just built in an area that actually was zoned properly, would you still see this as a viable, a nice place that you would like to live?
Yes, I think so. I think what I think interests me about this is saving the facade of the property and developing it into that condo type building where I guess aging adults and maybe empty nesters might find their way from their large single family homes. For my wife and I, who we're just under 50, and our two boys are one of them's going to be off to university in the fall. We're starting to consider that maybe our large single family house someday is going to be too large for us, too difficult to upkeep, and so having a choice of a condo type building within the neighborhood that we so love for its the ability for us to go for walks around the lake and its proximity to the legislature and things, that's quite attractive to us. So I guess that's why we thought we would speak up because we are a resident of the neighborhood and we'd like to stay there in our next stage of life.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Councillor Bresciani?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Thank you, Mr. Turgeon, for coming forward to speak today. I have a question for you in regards to you're a resident in that area, you've indicated. What if you were the adjacent neighbor? What would be your thoughts? Would you be coming forth with the same thought? I think it's one thing to be a neighbor in the area, but a neighbor that would border this large condo development. Would your thoughts be different? Through you, Madam Chair.
I don't think so. I think what's attractive to me about this project is it really will bring a new dimension to the neighborhood. If I was across the street or behind the alley, the house to the right, I would view it as an investment in the area. I mean, just this summer, I think, kind of midsummer, a lot of the brambly bush was finally removed from around the perimeter, and then which kind of opened up the house a little bit, and it's significantly deteriorated, and you know, the owner of the property, Carmen Lean, has put forth this plan for investment and beautification of that corner, and I believe that that's what would interest me most as a neighbor, is that somebody is willing to step up and save the architectural heritage of it while adding to the property. So I believe if I was just across the street or behind the back alley, I mean, the building is clearly going to be a fairly high-end condo building, and so it would probably keep with the same type of residents in it. They might be older folks or retired folks, maybe some professionals. That's what I think that this building will attract.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further members wishing to ask questions, I'd like to thank you again for your presentation, Mr. Turgeon, and now ask you to leave the meeting.
Thanks. Hello?
I'd like to call upon Delegation Lane Arthur. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you are representing, if any. You have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions Council may have from you. Good afternoon, Mr. Arthur.
Good afternoon. My name is Lane Arthur. I represent Lane Arthur Architecture Limited. I have been working with Carmen Lean on this property since better part of 2.5 years now, I believe, going through the process of approaching council to remove it from heritage designation. Spoke countless times on the property, and my belief in the project merits moving forward. We believe in the positive reinvestment in the neighborhood, its increase in density, the area's increasing demographics of elderly people, providing them the opportunity to stay within their neighborhood in an alternate type facility. We have worked very hard on creating a compromise project that helps balance my client, Carmen Lean's, desire to increase density and development within the property while still respecting the majority parts of the heritage that exists on the house, while trying to fit it in with the adjacent properties and still work out those balances quite through conserved effort of trying to balance sustainability, development, regrowth, and that we were very disappointed in the last council when the provincial review panel came back and decided that we should invest in a structural third-party initiative to help confirm some of the costs associated and financial hurdles that my client is faced with as far as the structural foundation upgrades, as well as the effects throughout the full structure of the home, and those costs, and trying to create a project that balances those costs while still trying to preserve the heritage. So yeah, we were disappointed with that. So we went to the drawing boards to try and come up with a compromise that can increase density, bring more sustainable amount of people to the neighborhood. His vision of developing this area, I feel, is commendable in this approach that he wants to bring investment into it instead of delegating it to the outskirts of the city, and give people the opportunity to the downtown as well as the legislative properties and the grounds and the parks and the amenities that go with it. Change, I know, is difficult and hard to sometimes accept and get through, but buildings, like people, age and involve a lot of ongoing financial upkeep and investments over time, so we can preserve and protect our buildings. I'm not opposed to heritage preservation or conservation. I've worked on a number of projects throughout my 25 years in this community, larger institutions such as the Saskatchewan Legislative Building and Casino Regina project, and know that over time owners are, see opportunity to redevelop and reuse old historical buildings, and we are open to working with the city and the council as well as the heritage people on those aspects to make a project viable. We brought forth this proposal as a way to compromise and to begin to come to some sort of project that will work with the neighborhood and the city council's support. Yes, so I'm in full support of the project as a professional and being involved in it. And I know that I'm sure there's a lot of questions the council would like to ask me. And I just wanted to be as brief as possible in the first part. So I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. Members of council? Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you very much, Mayor Masters. I just have one question for you, Mr. Arthur. The Provincial Heritage Board, the Regina Planning Commission, and the City Administration all felt that the proposal that you and your client have put forward did not meet heritage standards and would not be good for the neighborhood. Do you have any comment on that?
I'm sorry, sir, you sort of broke up a little bit. May I ask you to repeat the question?
Yes, I can. The Provincial Heritage Board, the Regina Planning Commission, and the City Administration all concluded that your proposal and your client's proposal does not meet heritage guidelines and would not enhance the neighborhood. I was wondering if you have any comment on that.
The Provincial Heritage Board, are you referring to the Saskatchewan Heritage Association?
I think it's called, I think it's a board, actually.
I don't believe any authority board has. Are they talking about this development process or our designation to?
Well, in the case of the Heritage Board, they looked at the heritage value of this building, this house, and concluded that it should be preserved as a heritage building.
I'm sorry, sir. Are you referring to the development or the heritage designation of the house?
Let me rephrase this to make it a little easier.
Yes.
The Regina Planning Commission heard these arguments, and unanimously, both the citizens and the councillors on the Regina Planning Commission rejected them. The city administration has recommended against this proposal. Do you have any comment on those rejections?
my comments to that is that we have a process in place, and we have my client, as well as every community member, has a right to propose a proposal and put it forth. And I believe we've followed the law and that to put this forward. In regards to the heritage designation of the property, we followed our due process in getting through that. As far as the review panel, as far as the document, yes, following the letter of the T of the heritage guidelines, it does recommend minimal stuff when appropriate, but it doesn't disregard the opportunity to redevelop a property or make substantial structural changes or repurpose the property. It's still within the guidelines of the Heritage Conservation Act. The provincial board noted that the previous designation heavily disregarded the economical arguments of the substantial qualifications of the project, in the sense that it wasn't deemed as value or impact the value of the heritage components. I've never argued that there isn't some heritage qualities of the project, or that there aren't heritage qualities to the project. We've tried to conserve as much as we can within this project, following proper conservation. I put forth the conservation plan, itemizing how we would, remove the brick, clean the brick, save the structure, save the windows, refinish the windows, put them back in, and yes, there is no yes, sorry. We definitely feel that we've come up with a viable solution that can, save a portion of the house. Does it save all of it? No, it doesn't. It's a compromise of trying to weigh the pros and cons of multiple viewpoints, bringing sustainability in and not putting 100% emphasis, importance behind one criteria, which is heritage. There's plenty of balance that is required on a project. We believe that we are saving a considerable amount of heritage, and the administration was open to us exploring this option.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Fundura.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Mr. Arthur, you mentioned that you've been working with this proposal, this development for the last couple of years. At any point of time, I'm going to ask you, have you considered looking at a smaller build-out or a small development? As you know, within the zone, you're allowed for a duplex or two separate lots. Was that ever considered?
Yeah, it was. We've considered all sorts of options. I'm working with my client's wishes and his financial models, and we've explored numerous solutions, and this is the one that he feels catches the value of the most value, as well as benefits that he wants to explore within a project. As a professional, I work with clients and try and balance all sorts of different aspects within a project, and yes, we've explored numerous scenarios, and this is the one that we have chosen to come forward with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arthur. So I want to follow up. So this particular development that we see in front of us right now, is this the only development that is going to make viable to restore the house? If going for a smaller, so is this the only way that this house will be restored, by going with the development that is there now? No value in the smaller development to continue restoring, to restore the property, the house?
Well, there's, as there are plenty of scenarios to explore, and the amount of money that one would want to put into a project. But this is the one that my client feels that is the best decision for him to make. I provide him the potential solutions, and we work as a team to come up with, the economical forecasts, and that he is the one that's been financially putting the model together. So. Okay.
So my analysis, if I may, when someone buys a heritage, when the owner, when the proponent purchased the property, it was on a holding list. With the heritage properties, one buys it, as we heard from previous delegations saying about, you understand that there are components in it and stress in the financial investment when you purchase a property like that, and so there are no other alternative by going with this large development with it to restore this house. That's the only way it's viable. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
No, this is one solution that my client feels makes his project viable in the solution of moving his investment forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Masters. No further questions.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. Mr. Arthur, I'm wondering if you can disclose to us the anticipated price range for each of these condo units if your client was successful today.
I do not have that particular information. I think he can speak to that about what his forecasting on selling it. My understanding, it's going to be around the 300,000 range, I believe. I don't have those figures. As I said, I've focused on the concept and the overall plans. I didn't create the cost estimate or the financial modeling, and that's other team members on our project that put forth that specialized knowledge. So I do not know specifically what the sell points are of each thing. I think he mentioned that in his development proposal as far as what tax revenue there'll be for the property and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'll maybe follow up with him directly then. Appreciate it.
Sorry.
No, not at all. No problem. Thank you.
Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question in regards to the actual kind of architecture that's in from the old to the new build. Was there any discussions with Heritage Regina or any of these two when you were creating this? And it's beautiful, by the way. But was there any discussion to carry on some of that character of the turret and the peaks throughout the other from any of the heritage, or was it just kind of done again with your own designers and thoughts? Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, we worked out the design ourselves. There's a history of between my client and the other groups. He didn't want to open up shareholder on other opinions in that. We interpreted the heritage guidelines. I know a few delegates forward have talked about how it's not complementary. Well, actually, the guidelines say that you shouldn't have identical, and it confuse the aesthetics. We don't want to put a building that is the Tudor style right beside this house. I've talked with the administration on this a number of times through the process of their interpretation on what subordinate means from a visual artist point of view. There's a concept called juxtaposition, and by putting a red ball beside another red ball surrounded by a bunch of red balls, it's not subordinate. It becomes lost in its in the field. Whereas if you have contrasting elements, it helps pop the red ball out if you surround it with white balls. So that's sort of an analogy of how we develop the composition of the space. We created a style, we utilize a style more of like a Gothic revival, a Romanesque revival next to the Tudor to help differentiate the Tudor. We've used more muted, natural, darker colors, so the white stucco and the thatched roof and the tower would pop forward. We moved it more closer to the street in line with the adjacent properties to respect the other properties. So it's been a balance of a lot of different aspects. The position of the addition to the south helps gain. I'm certified in passive house design, which started in Regina in the 70s with the conservation house in the north part of Regina. And I believe that, we're embodying some of that history into this project. So we needed to harvest the southern exposure, which became, one would say, not subordinate to the Hill Avenue board, but because we're weighing different aspects of sustainability, densification, and that, we're coming up with what we believe is a creative, positive solution that balances a lot of different competing philosophies and design parameters of the project.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank you for your presentation today, Mr. Arthur, and I'll ask you to now leave the meeting.
Okay.
I'd like to call upon Delegation Pat Therion. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any. You have 5 minutes to address City Council, and will have the opportunity to respond to questions following your presentation. Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Therion, and I am representing my lovely wife Tamara and myself, who live within a stone's throw of the former Cook residence on the 3200 block of Angus Street. I rise and speak in favor of the Regina Planning Commission's recommendation and hope that City Council will unanimously concur with their recommendation. Tamara and I purchased our home in the old Lakeview area in the summer of 2019. We chose this area of the city because of the architectural charm, peace, tranquility, and overall beauty of the single-family dwelling neighborhood, all the while trusting that the city would continue to value and preserve the aesthetics of the neighborhood and its unique heritage stature. Needless to say, you've all heard from numerous residents and ratepayers throughout your long or short tenures thus far on City Council. I've had the pleasure of speaking directly to most of you on this issue, both pre and post the municipal election. On that note, there is little sense in belaboring my points because you've all heard them. However, I am elated to see that they seemingly line up with many others you've heard from. Those have included Heritage Regina, various prominent Regina citizens, a Regina developer that hasn't worked for the applicant, as well as many, many, many Lakeview residents. What I would like to speak to, however, is the methodology of how we have gotten to this point today. From the time of the initial sale of the former Cook residence to the applicant in the fall of 2018, we have seen, number one, an application for demolition. Number two, a city-funded laborious process to notify and inform all residents in close proximity to the former Cook residence of the applicant's intentions. These were dropped off at our residences on September 3rd. Number three, a somewhat controversial inaugural town hall forum with little to no public interaction, which included canned questions and well-prepared responses from both the developer and senior city planner. Number four, that in turn led us to a proposal promised appearance of the application before the City Planning Commission for their December meeting, only to find out that the applicant was suspect of a non-recommendation and was able to retract his application prior to its appearance in front of the board to tweak it, as your senior city planner called it. Number five, that tweaking could have led to yet another city-funded process to yet again inform the residents of the amended application, receive feedback again, and perhaps a second orchestrated public town hall forum. Thankfully, this council demonstrated the fortitude and cut short the tweaking process and pushed the application forward, albeit a couple months after its initial timeline. The sheer bizarreness of this application lends itself to you supporting the Planning Commission's recommendations. How many applicants ever request a trifecta of zoning and bylaw changes, which would include purchasing part of a main city thoroughfare and get to have it considered over the course of months and months? Although today's vote may put this issue to rest, I personally do not believe we have put it to bed. I believe this arduous application process, along with fundamental to proper city although it's fundamental to city policy, needs to consider an economy of scales in order to actually reflect and charge the cost incurred by the City of Regina taxpayers when the same property reappears. Having no appeal process to your decision today does not preclude the applicant from reapplying and applying with tweaked versions. In closing, I would like to share a few quotes with respect to this issue from our current mayor during her leadership campaign on November 4th, 2020. In quotations, lack of leadership has created this situation. In quotations, the situation should have never gotten to this point. In quotations, specific to this issue with heritage being so important to the community, we need to identify the true heritage assets and figure out a way to ensure they are safeguarded and do not fall into disrepair. End quotations. Why do I get the feeling, along with 1,100 anonymous commentators on the file, that this perhaps is the next plan of action? We are looking forward to this council following through on these promises and ensuring a more efficient process going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Therrien. Do we have any questions of the delegation? Seeing none, I'll thank you for your presentation this afternoon and ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Thank you.
I would like to call upon Delegation Paul Nubarian. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any. You will have 5 minutes to present to City Council, after which time you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that members of council may have for you. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Paul Nubarian. I'm actually a citizen of Regina and somebody who has just watching this unfold. So what I'd like to do is just talk about different things. Number one, basically, I have heard a lot of things talked about this program for and against it, but I wanted to speak to some of the things that I observed when I reviewed some of the meeting notes from last Saturday and the video and that. I guess one thing I am concerned with and how it got to here was the objectivity. I hear a lot of reasons why the house should be left as it is, the property should be left as it is, but I have to say that most of them I would classify as sentimental, and I'm not really hearing anything that's telling me why it's the best option is to leave things the way they are. So now, when I look at that, I also look that the street address of this is on Albert Street. It's not on Hill Avenue. And I'd like to cite a few current examples. Number one, on College Avenue, we see a lot, which again is an arterial road, or maybe not even to the degree that Albert Street is. And we have development on College Avenue between Albert Street and Broad Street, where there's a lot of redevelopment that has gone on in an established character neighborhood. And so I also notice on Broad Street, again, we've had development there on the east side between across from Wascana Park, north of Gladmer Park. So north of Broadway, south of College, east side of Broad Street. Residential developments that seem to embellish the neighborhood. So objectively, I'm just trying to understand the difference between this, and I don't really see that big of a difference. The next point I'd like to make is that in Regina, what is the post-COVID recovery plan as it relates to jobs, commerce, and just a contribution to a progressive Regina to get us out of these things. Now, on that note, I've noticed other cities, and I've lived in many. In Winnipeg, what is going on this site is not uncommon. Calgary, same thing. I know we're not Calgary or Winnipeg, but these are comparable cities that are progressive. When I look at different examples, one most recently from Toronto, where an old church was. They're doing some development on it, and it's a residential development. And then we just have to look at what I believe is the Chateau Laurier in Quebec City, and there's a new development, and there's an architectural embellishment on the building that blends the old with the new, and I think that's just the direction of progress. And then I guess. When I look back in the city of Regina, and I look at some of the projects that have gone by here, I just wonder what the city would be like right now if, let's say, the Hill family was prevented from doing progressive developments like they have been. Our downtown core certainly wouldn't look like it is at this point, and I mean that negatively. So I think it's a very positive place, the downtown core, and I know the Hills have been a big part of that. Sometimes projects take people with forward thinking to get things done. Now, I look at this situation, and I think 80 years from now, the Historical Society would praise the actions and forward thinking of Mr. Lean for preserving the integrity of the building at great cost of his own money, while providing a very good housing and improving the architectural character of this charming neighborhood. So, much in favor of the thing to do. I think it would demonstrate that the city is proactive and forward-thinking while retaining and preserving the past. And I think that's a much better option than leaving that home there to just deteriorate with age and be unsellable. And I think that is why I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarian. Members of council, does anyone have any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, I'll thank you, sir, for your presentation this afternoon and ask you to now leave the meeting.
Thank you very much.
I would like to call upon Delegation Dan Tebow. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any. You will have 5 minutes to present to City Council, after which time you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions that members of Council may have for you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, your worship and councillors. My name is Dan Tebow, and I'm a realtor with Home Life Crawford Realty. I'm speaking to you today as an individual who has background, experience, and expertise in selling and refurbishing new and MLS market homes. To be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of my employer, nor do I have a vested interest in the property. My comments this afternoon are for the purpose of supporting and speaking in favor of the renovation and additions to the Cook residence by the owner, Carmen Leon. Being a realtor and also a home renovator, I asked Mr. Leon for a tour of the property to gain my own perspective and assessment of the property. I found the home to be in an obvious and significant state of disrepair. For example, there's a tarp on the west side of the home to protect it from the elements. I've also rejuvenated, I really dislike the term renovated, several homes in South Regina, and I'm quite aware of the cost of repair, especially to a home that requires between $600,000 to $950,000 in structural work alone. I understand the current owner's plan is to fully restore the exterior of the existing building, thus maintaining much of the original character, in addition to ensuring that the majority of the units are fully wheelchair accessible. I believe that this rejuvenation, consisting of the renovation of 3 or 4 high-end condominiums in the current structure and the addition of a dozen or so condos in a newly built structure, would be a great benefit and fit for the community. There will also be 24 underground parking spots, thus alleviating the congested parking concerns. I checked the South End condo listings for sale through MLS this morning. There were only 3 condos currently for sale in the whole area, ranging in price from $390,000 to $565,000. My wife and I currently reside in Albert Park and love the amenities offered in the South End. If this development were to proceed, I could see us living there in a few years. In terms of additional benefits for the city of Regina, this development would also provide a large injection of new tax-based revenue for the city. As a neighbor, I would truly ask myself, is it better for the neighborhood to have a transformed and rejuvenated property, or continue to watch a dilapidated and worn-out building continue to fester and rot? If the current structure were demolished and another single-family home built, one would assume that it would not replicate the architectural design period of the current home, which the neighbors so strongly favor. For several years, Regina saw a huge increase in the building of new condos, and yes, the condominium market was severely saturated. But condo builds have taken a massive step back in construction. I do believe there is a need for this type of condo development, as it will be far superior to many of the slap-em-up-quick developments that we have seen in recent years. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Tebow. Members of Council, does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, I'll thank you, Mr. Tebow, for your presentation this afternoon and ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Thank you. Take care.
I would like to call upon Delegation Colin McCrum. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any. You'll have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which time you will have an opportunity to respond to any questions that Council may have for you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Colin McCrum. I live on the 3100 block of Angus Street and share a laneway with the Cook residents in Lakeview. I'd like to begin by stating my disappointment that this contentious development proposal has gone so far along in the approval process within the city administration as it has today. As has been pointed out already, this has cost Regina taxpayers significant dollars and wasted countless hours of time that could have been spent on other city initiatives. The process has also had a significant negative impact on many residents in Lakeview that oppose this development proposal. For many of us, our homes not only represent a large financial investment, but also our homes make up the fabric of our Lakeview neighborhood and sense of community. If approved, the Cook House development proposal would be detrimental to our neighborhood. The proposal would devalue surrounding homes, cause a potential for damage to foundations through the construction process, increase the risk of vehicular and pedestrian accidents, and the neighborhood would lose a valuable piece of Regina heritage. As I've mentioned, I live on Angus Street in the Herald residence, which was built in 1914 and is on the Heritage Regina inventory list. When my wife and I, along with our 2 small children, moved back to Regina in 2012, we immediately fell in love with the character and charm of Lakeview. We were fortunate enough to find a home and purchase the property knowing it was on the Heritage Inventory list and what that meant as a property owner. Living in a house that is over 100 years old does require investment to preserve and maintain the property. Therefore, it came as a surprise to learn that the developer purchased the Cook residence and applied for a demolition permit within weeks of taking ownership. Through previous meetings and local media, we have heard from the developer that he is saving the Cook House, and this is not the case. The development calls for the demolition of all but a portion of the Cook residence. A 12-foot deep front facade, minus that south sunroom, would remain. The developer believes it might be possible to move this 12-foot deep facade around the property while digging out the underground parkade. And when asked during the open house what would happen if the Cook residence was damaged during the move, the developer's response was, that's what insurance is for. I would also like to clarify that the development proposal calls for 34 parking stalls. At a minimum of 1 trip per day, that is 68 vehicles traveling through the narrow laneway and onto 21st Avenue or Hill Avenue. The city administration report simply has not done a satisfactory job of measuring the true impact to traffic and parking hazards that this development would pose. The developer has stated that he is improving laneway safety by the removal of the existing garage of the home and increasing sightlines onto Hill Avenue. In actuality, these sightlines will be blocked by vehicles parked along Hill Avenue due to the increased traffic caused by the condominium development. It raises the question, then, why did the city administration entertain a development proposal that actually makes a neighborhood less safe for residents than it is today? As the Cook House has remained vacant since being purchased by the developer, there are significant concerns from the community that the home is not being sufficiently cared for while the applicant has attempted to gain approval to develop the property. Today, there are insufficient processes in place to monitor this heritage property to ensure it is not enduring additional deterioration due to neglect. To address these concerns, the city needs to develop heritage maintenance policies with input from Heritage Regina, the community, and other subject matter experts. I also wanted to point out that the city administration report indicated that there were approximately 1,100 anonymous responses in support of the development proposal. As it is impossible to determine if anonymous responses both for and against the proposal are the result of an eager individual with a lot of free time and an internet connection or actual individual residents, I believe all anonymous responses should be disregarded and the process changed for future development proposals. Lastly, I believe that city bylaws serve a valuable purpose. These are the rules and principles that help define life for Regina residents. I do not believe that these bylaws should be disregarded in the pursuit of personal wealth. This development proposal is looking to be exempt from several separate bylaws, and if this proposal is approved to proceed, it will set a dangerous precedent for future heritage homes throughout Lakeview and Cathedral neighborhoods. Thank you again for your time and the opportunity to present to you today.
Thank you, Mr. McCrum. Council, any have questions for the delegation? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for your presentation again and ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Thank you. And if this proposal is approved to proceed, it will set a dangerous precedent for future heritage homes throughout Lakeview and Cathedral neighborhoods. Thank you again for your time and the opportunity to present to you today.
I would like to call upon Delegation Kavita Patel. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you are representing, if any. You will have 5 minutes to present to City Council, after which time you'll be given the opportunity to respond to any questions that Council may have for you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Am I clear here? I'm not quite sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. All right. Well, my name is Kavita Patel, and I am in support in the Cook House development project. I feel like I have to start off by saying I have pretty much lived in Regina my entire life. My parents are immigrants, and they were immigrants here, and my father worked in pharmaceutical sales, and my mother stayed at home. My dad's first love when he moved to this country was construction, but he said, he used to always say he figured out early on that it was hard to be successful in this field in Saskatchewan. When he finally did decide to retire and pursue his dream, he left the province. In fact, my entire immediate family, except for myself, has left the province. My dad has always said that Regina was 15 to 20 years behind all the other provinces and that Saskatchewan refused to see progress as an advantage. And that was over 20 years ago. And I'm sad to say not much has changed. I do support the Cook House development project because I feel it will add diversity and value to an area that has pretty much become stagnant. I have seen the plans, and the building is beautiful and has made every effort to preserve and maintain the character and aesthetics of the neighborhood. It allows the house to be saved and also now to serve a purpose, which at this point in time, I don't see that it is. I feel like it'll increase the property value of the area and allow some people who've never been able to access the area a chance to enjoy it. Frankly, I think it is unfair to vilify a project that is only trying to progress and add value to the neighborhood. It seems to me that this is part of an effort for the neighborhood to not only control what moves into the area, but who. It is the responsibility of the council to create a neighborhood that is more inclusive and diverse. I do support this project because I think it is a potential sign that Regina might be finally ready to start moving in the direction that it should be, which is forward. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Members of council, does anyone have questions for the delegation? Seeing none, I'll thank you, Ms. Patel, for your presentation this afternoon and ask that you please leave the meeting now.
All right, thank you.
I would like to call upon Delegation Larry Grega. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any. You will have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any question members of council may have for you. Good afternoon, Mr. Grega. Sir, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Mr. Grega, try pressing *6 on your phone. Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Grega, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Were you able to hear my preamble?
No, I didn't.
All right, then I'll say it again. One moment, please. I would like to call upon Delegation Larry Grega. You'll introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing, if any. You will have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that Council may have from you. Please proceed, sir.
Oh, my name is Larry Grega. I'm representing myself, and I'm in favor of the improvement of this property, Ms. Mayor and City Council, and I believe that it enhances the neighborhood that is residential development will bring to Regina. I believe it falls within the city's plan for more residents residing near or at the heart of the city. Having reviewed the development plans and footprint, I, for one, am seriously considering living in such an upscale property close to the park. It has many amenities, including underground parking, not accessed off the busy Albert Street, as many other residents have to use. After my due diligence on other projects, linked developments completed, I will have full confidence in this project. This is, in my view, would enhance and keep the historical integrity of the area, as well, being of benefit to the city through extra taxes. This is historical retrofit and neighborhood revitalization, as seen in many other cities like Vancouver or Victoria, give the level of community integrity to Albert Street residences, which the residences are known for, compared to the dilapidated property the Cook residence has become. It is indicative that the city takes serious consideration in favor of this project, which would have our community leap into a better Regina for the future while keeping are passed with developers like Link willing to risk money and opportunity cost here. Hopefully these developers will not be frustrated, which may bring them to other communities if this project like this is not discussed on Thursday this week. I stand for the development. This could be presented on my behalf if you want, but I'm saying it right now. So that's what I have. I think it's a development that will improve Regina. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Members of council, do you have any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, I'll thank you for your presentation this afternoon, Mr. Grega, and ask that you leave the meeting now.
Thank you.
In a somewhat unorthodox manner, council, we have a legislative stop in 15 minutes. Mr. Lean is the next individual on the docket. So we can start and stop, or we can take a break now for 15 minutes. All right. Mr. Lean, if you're listening, you'll have to call back in at, by my rules, 11 minutes past. At 3:11, we will reconvene the meeting. We are going to take a 15-minute break, as we are required to do. So I'm just asking that you call back in at 10 after 3, and we'll queue you up as the last presenter. Thank you. We'll be taking a recess now, 15 minutes. 3:11, we're back. 1 minute. I appreciate it. We're going to reconvene now. It's 3:11. Is he on the phone? I would like to call upon Delegation Carmen Lean. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you are representing, if any. You will have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions members of Council may have for you. Good afternoon, Mr. Lean.
Good afternoon. My name is Carmen Lean. I am the owner of 3160 Albert Street. As you guys are all aware, I have submitted my documentation, so I will try to be short. So when I purchased the cookhouse, my intentions have been the same: build a place for my parents to downsize to. I have followed the procedures and process, and I've met every policy, or else we would not be here today. The decision today is simple. Do we want to save the cookhouse? Do we want to make decisions that fall in line with the OCP? I do. And with my proposal and the concessions that I've already made, I will be saving the entire property while following the guidelines from the OCP. We have also followed the guidelines from Standards and Guidelines of Conservation of Historical Places of Canada, and our redevelopment is completely in the realm of those guidelines. We've done our professional due diligence, and I'm confident to say that we are the only group here that to be able to make that statement. We've done a servicing study and a comprehensive conservation plan by professionals who support this proposal. Our project is financially viable and is a balance between heritage conservation and City of Regina policies. We're not only saving the cookhouse today. Our goal is to create an upper scale condo development that will bring a much needed affordable housing to Lakeview. Our units will be built with today's standards in sustainability and accessibility, with the majority of our units being 100% accessible for seniors and people with mobility issues, and give a viable option for them to stay in Lakeview or move into the neighborhood. Our project will bring $8 million investment to our city and generate nearly $150,000 in fees paid to the City of Regina. More importantly, we'll increase the property taxes by 700% without any investment from the City of Regina. All the required infrastructure is already in place, and we'll be able to utilize these investments that the city have already made. The property sits on one of the busiest roads intersection in Regina, and there's public transit and a large employment area across the street. And these are many of the few elements that make this a great multifamily site. With the speakers today, there are a lot of people who agree with this, and more importantly, 2/3 of the public who've already voiced their opinions that this is a good project. With only 12% of the homes in Lakeview non-single family dwellings, we need to create opportunities for Lakeview to become a more complete neighborhood, and more residential options are needed. Our project is respectful to the neighborhood as possible, and once again, a balance between viability, policy, and heritage conservation. We needed to develop a plan to allow us to overcome a $1.3 million restoration project while being mindful of zoning bylaws and the neighborhood. To circle back, the decision today is simple. The council wants to save the cookhouse and improve heritage conservation in Regina, then support this project. If council wants to better utilize our infrastructure while creating property taxes to support our city, then support this project. Council wants to achieve the policy set out in the OCP regarding the accessibility, sustainability, intensification, and affordability while building complete neighborhoods, then support this project. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lean. Council, do you have questions of Mr. Lean? Councillor Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Madam Mayor, a question for you, Carmen Leen. You mentioned that the roof is at the end of its lifespan, and I understand that the home was re-roofed in 2011-12. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that discrepancy in information.
Yes, the roof is at its lifespan. There's been a home inspection report that's indicated that. I believe the city administration has also done a home inspection, and which is also indicated. The roof is in disrepair. There has been moisture penetration in the rear of the home. There are images within the inspections that are in my reports that show the moisture damage. I'm unaware of when the last time the roof was actually redone, but all indications by professionals and inspectors indicate that it is at the end of its lifespan.
All right. Through you, Mayor Masters, I appreciate the fact that you say you want to save the cookhouse and that you believe your development will save the cookhouse. However, it will require, your proposal requires quite drastic adjustments to the home. Would you consider just refurbishing and restoring the house itself without the addition?
Sorry, Councillor, you just cut out there. Can you repeat your question?
It's hard with the mask. I'm going to take it off to speak. Yep. Would you consider not continuing with the development and just restoring the house if council does not approve your proposal? And would you consider just restoring the house as it is, the property?
Thank you for the question. We have considered restoring the house as is. Through our due diligence, when we did our analysis of the property, I've had received 2 quotes from reputable companies. One is a commercial heritage company, which is Ledcor, which is currently working on some of the College Avenue campus. They indicated that the restoration of this property as is was going to be $3 million. At the same time, previous to this, when I went through council, Tom Moore, who is a prominent residential developer and home builder in Regina, also indicated that it was going to be north of $3 million to restore it. So with these numbers, restoring this property as a single-family dwelling is just not financially viable. At the same time, we've looked at just doing 4 units in the existing structure, which still made it financially not viable. Through our work, we know that at a minimum, just the restoration cost alone, which is the exterior and bringing in some of the life requirements of the structure to current standards where it's not deteriorating anymore, it's going to be $1.3 million if I'm able to restore it as indicated in my conservation plan. It is important for me to note that without a clear and approved plan from the City of Regina, it is difficult for me to continue to invest in trying to rehabilitate and restore this property. Everything that we've done in our analysis has followed the strict guidelines from the standards and guidelines, and going through our own city policies indicated in the OCP. So it is not viable to maintain this property as a single-family dwelling unless, and I'm going to put the caveat in there, unless there's a new grant that will be able to support a $3 million grant. It is unlikely that this house will ever be a single-family dwelling.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there was another delegation earlier today that lives on Albert Street. She said that she did restore her house because she values the character home that she owns on Albert Street. In any case, if council does not approve this today, I'm just kind of curious, would you take the condo development, the aspect of the design that you have done for the condo development, that on its own is a beautiful development, would you take that somewhere else in an area that is already zoned for multi-residential?
Once again, thank you for the question, and thank you for the praise of the design of the project. As a developer, I will say it's highly unlikely that we would take the condo design that we've put in place here and just move it to another site. I don't believe in doing cookie cutter developments. When we start a redevelopment and when I do a project, I really look at the site specific and look at the amenities that that site has given us. We look at the design and what we're trying to achieve that's respectful to the neighborhood. And that's why this project does look the way it is. There's a huge financial premium to this design. The use of Tyndallstone that we've brought in from the Legislative Building and other prominent homes in Lakeview, the use of metal to also represent, the dome at the Legislative. These are premium products. If we were to build this in a different area, these design attributes might not be required, and it might not fit in the neighborhood. And I think that's important through our design, that we do fit the neighborhood and try to make something special for this site specific. Now, I do respect my neighbor who has spent her time investing in redeveloping her house. But I want to make sure that everyone understands, and what's important is that every home is different. Every home has different deficiencies. And the way this home was constructed and the deterioration over the years has made this project unviable to save as a single-family dwelling. And we would need an extensive intensification to be able to make this project work.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission to us and your presentation today, Mr. Lean. I have a few questions for you. We've seen pictures from December 2019 when the former owners moved out of this property. Based on those photos, the interior of the property was very well maintained at that time. I'm wondering if this is still the case, and also how you respond to neighbors who claim that you have not been entering the house because they haven't seen anyone or evidence of any footprints in the snow. Through the chair, please.
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? I'm just getting cut off here.
Okay. We've seen pictures from December 2019 when the former owners moved out of this property. Based on those photos, the interior was very well maintained at the time. I'm wondering if this is still the case, and also how you respond to neighbors who claim that you have not been entering the house because they haven't seen anyone or evidence of any footprints in the snow.
Thank you for the question. I can acknowledge some of those photos, but what some of those photos don't show, and as indicated in the home inspections that were done at that time, was the mold that is growing in the ceiling, where moisture has penetrated, where the ceiling has fallen down. There was a tarp that was covering the west portion of the facade so that moisture wouldn't come in. It doesn't show the boiler that's nearing 80 years old in the basement, and pictures can't describe the 7-inch differential of sloping in the building as it's falling onto the one side. So I do respect that those photos, show a pristine home, but that's just not the case. And anyone who wants to tour the house or do an inspection of the house will quickly be able to see that. There are lots of aspects of the home that are very salvageable, and we plan to do so. We've done a heritage inventory list, and everything that we can salvage and reuse will be used in our redevelopment. As for how I know the house will continue to sit there without any deterioration, is that we have gone and made the investment to winterize the house. We're protecting the home as best as we can at this point, and I'm doing everything that I'm legally obligated to do. I have people check in on the house. I drive by the home, and I check in on as much as I can. Are we there every day? The answer is no. Are we there every couple of days? The answer is yes. And we kind of pop in. It doesn't take long to do our quick inspection, and there's numerous people who are in and out of the house checking up on it. So we are doing what we are legally obligated to do, and at the same time, we are constantly trying to come up with new concepts and ways to preserve the home, and we are making those investments. And I welcome anyone who wants to tour the home to reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to show it to them.
Okay, thank you. I have some follow-up to questions based on your answers. So the first is, can you clarify whether the house is in the same state as when you purchased the home? Has it deteriorated, or have you maintained it in the same state that you purchased it in? And also, when was the last time that somebody physically entered the home, and how often are people physically entering the home?
I will say that I feel like the house is actually in a better condition for preserving the home. Previous to my ownership, there were leaky pipes. There were, elements that were deteriorating the interior as well as exterior. We've gone through and we've winterized the house, and we've made it so that we are slowing down the deterioration process. But time is working against the property. As for when I was there, when there's someone physically there, well, we did a global news interview yesterday morning, and so there was someone there yesterday. There was someone there the day before. We try to be in the house every second to third day. But I will acknowledge sometimes that does not happen, but we are doing our best to monitor the property.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question is, you use the term affordable housing when talking about your proposed development plans. There were some questions previously about the proposed costs of the units. Do you have, and sorry, Councillor LeBlanc, if you were planning to ask this, do you have a price range in mind? Can you clarify what you mean by affordable housing? What does that mean to you? What price range qualifies as affordable housing in this instance? Through Mayor Masters, please.
Thank you for the question. As for affordable housing, when I make that statement, the average home in Lakeview right now is $366,554. My goal and commitment is to be able to at least create 30% of the units below that price point. My goal is to also try to produce at least 2 units, and if this does happen, 2 of the units will be near $325,000, because I do feel that, and we are making a commitment to make it affordable and a possible entry point for families to be in the neighborhood. And it just put in context, these units that we're trying to build aren't going to be a 600 square foot bachelor suite that I'm trying to sell at a low price point just to be able to say that I'm creating some affordable housing. These units are built with young families, seniors in mind. So, our suites are a minimum of 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, and actually some of the more affordable units will be 3 bedrooms and 3 baths, and they're geared towards young families that are trying to come into the neighborhood. So, and the plans are actually laid out already in the submission.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted to clarify, because my interpretation of affordable housing is a little bit different, so that clarification is helpful. And for my final comment slash question, so you talked about how this is in line with strategic plans of the city and the OCP. I did want to point out that in the report from administration, it says that while this proposal aligns with some general principles in the OCP, it challenges policies more specific to the neighborhood, and the OCP does not support the proposed residential intensification in this location. My next question is actually unrelated to that, so I will give you the opportunity to respond to that if you'd like.
Sorry, Councillor Zakiniak, comments towards the delegation have to be in the form of a question.
Okay. So then I'll just move forward to my final question, which is, my understanding is that your 2020 taxes on the property are in arrears by about $10,700. Is this accurate? Through the chair, please.
Thank you for the question. Actually, I'm glad someone brought that up. I'm not trying to hide it. That was brought to my attention yesterday. How I finance this project and pay for the bills is actually through my bank. I have made every payment through my mortgage, which is Scotiabank. I have evidence that this is the case. This was brought to my attention yesterday, and I have rectified that problem. I've reached out to my bank, and I feel that through COVID, there was a disconnect from invoicing from the city administration to Scotiabank, and those payments were not made. It is not the intent of mine to withhold property taxes. I have made those payments, and the money is sitting in a bank account. So I've been told by this morning from Scotiabank that payment will be made, and I do apologize for that. But I think I've never physically paid the property taxes since ownership of this property. It's always been done through my bank, and I always assumed that it was being made.
Okay, I think that completes my questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Zakiniak. Councillor Shaw?
Hi there, how are you? Through you, Madam Mayor, I have a question, a specific question. When you bought this property, did you do a home inspection before buying it?
Yes, I did do a home inspection before the purchase of this house. It indicated great distress on the property. The property was sold as is. There has been circumstances around that the purchase that allowed me to still want to purchase the property. But a home inspection was done, and we presented that. We have also had those discussions previous with the administration to to discuss the deterioration of the property. So yes, a home inspection was done previous to the purchase of the home.
Okay, thank you. A follow-up question. Since the home inspection came back with concerns, you have an option of purchasing it or not purchasing upon the approval of the home inspection. Am I correct? Was that in your agreement, sales agreement?
No, the property had a buy as is clause in the agreement. I actually remembered Councillor Flegel at the time brought that up. So that wasn't a clause in a possible clause. I think the previous owners knew that the home would not pass the home inspection and had made that clause very clear.
So you knew that this was coming up, but you still went ahead and purchased the property. Did you purchase it before the home inspection or after the home inspection? Through you, Madam Mayor.
I can't remember when the home inspection occurred, but yes, I believe I purchased the home. The home inspection was done for council to be able to, as part of my proposal, to have the house removed from the heritage designation list. At the time, as much as I recall, the glass house was going through this process, and one of the factors was viability of the home to be able to maintain its heritage status. So that triggered the home inspection to demonstrate to council at the time that this house was not viable as a single-family dwelling.
Okay, so here goes back, the responsibility lies in your lap. Upon buying a home, you can have a condition that we'll only buy it upon approval of the inspection. Now, I understand the inspection was not part of the home, you had to buy it as is, but that was your choice. And this is where it comes down to. Also your choice to buy the home knowing that it was on the heritage designated property list. Is that correct?
The home at the time was not on the heritage designated list. It was on the holding bylaw. And what that meant was the house had some potential heritage value. And through the process, I had numerous meetings with city administration that had never indicated that this house had enough heritage value to make this property a heritage designated property. And through the process, as we went through the provincial review board, the statement that I made that, administration never told me this house had heritage value as I did my due diligence was never refuted. It was after that I purchased the house that it was brought up that this house had potential heritage value. And even throughout that process, as a stakeholder, I was never brought on board to actually create or assist in the bylaw, which is indicated in the standards and guidelines as a process, is to bring in all stakeholders to determine what is feasible to be feasible and viable to be saved.
Okay, well, I mean,
Councillor Shaw?
You're kind of down.
Councillor Shaw, I'm just going to caution you when delegations, we don't enter into statement or argument, just questions only, please.
Okay. So my question is through you, Madam Mayor. It was kind of a 50-50 chance of this happening. Am I correct in that understanding?
I wouldn't want to speak for any of the council members. It is important that when I purchased the home that one of the primary reasons I wanted it off the heritage designation or holding list was that I knew the challenges that I'd have coming to council. The previous council thought it was important to make this historical site, which adds greater restriction to how we can actually save this property, and has left me with the only option or viable option is to create is to ask for more density to be able to overcome the restoration costs.
Can I ask one follow-up question from that question through you, Madam Mayor? Do you not have the option of selling it?
I do have the option of selling it. And, you know, I will say that if this proposal is denied, that is going to be one of the strongest options that we have, is to put this property up for sale. Because I cannot, without an approved plan or even our plan, we and my family cannot continue to invest in this property. You know, we believe that we are doing what we can to preserve the history here. We are saving, in my opinion, that we are saving this property, and I would like to be the developer and lucky guy to do so. But if this plan is denied,
that's totally. Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted you to answer that question, that you did have a possibility. That's all I have through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Bresciani?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lean. I want to first state the proposal, the development is absolutely very beautiful. It gets people excited. But I want to ask that you knew that this is heritage, deemed heritage. Can I ask why 12 to 16 condos? You knew the neighbors in the area did not want this already. Why so many? Through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for the question. And once again, thank you for the statement that, you know, that this is aesthetically pleasing. The amount of units is a byproduct of what it will take to overcome the restoration costs. When we purchased the property, once again, it was not deemed heritage. It was on a holding list. And I've stated time and time again that, you know, we wanted to create something that I could be proud of. And, you know, I heard loud and clear from the previous councils that this house needed to be saved. People wanted the Cook residence saved. And through our due diligence, and if our conservation plan is approved, it's a $1.3 million investment to create, to be able to rehabilitate this structure. And to do so, we need to increase the size of the structure. And by doing so, we knew how big we needed to build the property. And then we looked at the marketability of Regina, and that's how we came up with the amount of units that we required. We also looked at parking. As you all are aware, we have 24 stalls underground, so that was a limiting factor. I feel that for the target audience that we're trying to market the properties to, which are seniors, young families, you know, we also need to allocate 2 parking stalls. So these were some of the limiting factors to it. But overall, we need to be able to overcome the rehabilitation costs, and the byproduct of a larger building is the 16 units. Now, in my proposal, I would be okay with conceding to redesigning some of the layouts to accommodate 13 units. And that is a commitment that I make if that will help support the project. Yeah, that's the answer. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. To you, Madam Mayor, and I asked this to, I think, the individual that, Lane, that helped you design the building. Can you just talk a little bit about the heritage pieces that you've utilized? You did talk about using some of the stone and that kind of thing, but, you know, because this is a heritage site, you know, what were some of the other, you know, when we look at the turret and we look at the I guess I asked the same question. Why was, it's a very, and it's beautiful, but some of those other characteristics that are in the first piece, not in the second? Through you, Madam Mayor.
I won't, first, maybe before I get into those details, everyone points out that I'm fixing or reusing or mimicking some of the historical elements on the existing structure. We are not doing that. We are actually going to be restoring the exact elements that are currently on the structure through our design. So what you see will be restored so that has an ability to last the next 100 years. Mm-hmm. As for the design criteria of the turret and on the new structure, within the standards and guidelines, it is very specific that when you design an addition, that it can't be identical to the existing. People need to be able to determine the difference between the existing structure and the addition. So within our design process, we thought it was very important that we actually created two very specific structures. So we've chosen a neoclassical design that's very similar to Tudor, and it existed at the time. But while bringing in some of the design elements, for instance, you speak about the turret. Well, if you look on Hill Avenue, we feel like the entrance point and how it is brought forward pays respect to that turret. The turret is a two-story portion of the building that protrudes out. We've done that as well on Hill Avenue, but using a neoclassical design. We wanted to maintain the look of a two-story building, and that's why the Tyndallstone is brought to the second floor, and the third floor, which is meant to pay respect to the large sloping roofs, is in a different color so that it will hide or become invisible as the two-story Tyndallstone columns pop out. These were some of the design aspects that we looked at while following the standards and guidelines of conserving heritage places in Canada.
Okay. I think just the last question for me is, I was able to tour the house, saw the house prior to, and people were still living in the home at the time after you purchased it. And, comparing this one to the Bagshaw, I just want to ask Mr. Lane, did you happen to see the Bagshaw home?
No, but I understand that it was in more of a disarray than my current property. So no, I have not.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. I'm going to take a turn. Mr. Lean, my understanding of the point of zoning, and in this I'll just simply confess I agree with Wikipedia, is that the intent is to segregate uses of land that are thought to be incompatible, and in practice it's meant to prevent new development from interfering with existing uses or to preserve the character of a neighborhood. What is your understanding of the point of zoning?
That is, I will agree with that understanding of zoning. What is important here is, zoning is a tool that cities use to guide homeowners and property owners to what they construct. Now, at the same time, zoning is very important. City policy such as the OCP, which helps govern councils to make decisions. Rezoning applications happen, on a regular basis, and the OCP is what guides, hey, should that zoning application be looked at? And we wouldn't be here today if this was completely completely out of the question. I'm not looking to put an industrial building or a commercial strip mall on the site. What I'm asking for is to maintain a residential use, but to save the Cook residents, I need the density to do so. You know, as we've heard from other people, delegates, you know, should there be 3 units or 4 units or 5 units? Well, that still requires density. And within the standards and guidelines of the Heritage Conservation guidelines, that is a fully anticipated tool to be able to do so. And with Lakeview becoming a heritage conservation zone in the future, I can foresee higher density coming in the future to be able to preserve some of these heritage characteristics.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on a response you gave to Councillor Stadnichuk, in which you referred to yourself several times as a developer and to the home as a project. But in actuality, I believe you're a homeowner in this instant. Is that how you understood it? You were buying a home?
Yes, when I was purchasing a home, and I've stated this numerous times, it was a project that that I wanted to try and do to build a place for my parents to downsize. My parents currently reside in the East End, and I live in Albert Park. My hope would be one day that my parents move closer to me. And as we looked around in Lakeview and Albert Park for viable options from where my parents would reside, those options became non-existent. So it wasn't to start this project. It wasn't to buy 3160 Albert Street to be able to do this redevelopment. It was a project that I wanted to build a place for people like my parents to be able to reside in the South End. Now, when this property came as a potential site, I looked at the site. We spoke with the city administration. I knew the policies that were in the OCP, and we made that purchase, and I made that decision to do so.
Okay, and in follow-up to Councillor Shaw and Councillor Zakidniak's questions and your responses, could you help me understand how the market principle of buyer beware does not apply to you in this case?
I don't believe that buyer beware type of a philosophy. I will be the first to say I knew the risk of purchasing the site and this property for my project, but I feel like I've done my due diligence. I spoke with city administration before the purchase. I studied our OCP. I studied previous heritage sites like the Glass House and the outcome of those properties. I knew that our city had a policy that made it that wanted heritage conservation if it was possible, as it described in the OCP as the voluntary. And we are trying our best. We are looking at viable options, and maybe going back to one of the questions that Councillor Apprecié asked is, have I seen the Bradshaw house because it was in disarray? This house isn't in disarray, but it's not viable to maintain as a single-family dwelling. And if the City Council wants to have properties continue to deteriorate without a plan of restoration, well, that's what's going to happen here on this site. And I'm just trying to rehabilitate a property so that we have something to be proud of, and that'll beautify the neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions from council, I'll thank you for your presentation again today and ask that you leave the meeting.
Thank you for your time.
Prior to introducing the report, we did have a presenter that did want to appear in person and couldn't, but he did submit written. So can I have someone move a motion to receive and file CP 21-2? Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bandura. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Carried. We will now consider CR 21-30-3160 Albert Street Heritage Designation Bylaw Amendment, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, Partial Street Closure of Hill Avenue. Councillor Fundura, can you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Into CR 21-30-3160 Albert Street. Heritage Designation Bylaw Amendment, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, Contract Zone, and Partial Street Closure of Hill Avenue. Mayor Master, can I get a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Bob Hawkins.
So who's first? Councillor Hedniak? Thank you. Thank you very much. Mayor Masters, that Planning Commission on February 10th, there were about 8 delegations that presented, answered questions, and Mr. Lean was one of them. The Commission did talk about the rezoning, the heritage designation, the zoning, the partial closure of the street, the alley. Many questions were asked. We spent quite a bit of time. It was a Saturday morning. It's just about partial day, so we didn't take this very lightly. We talked about how this proposal, this development fits into the neighborhood. We talked about density, integrity of the neighborhood, and there was large discussion about the alley that was in question with this development, and a lot of the concerns were about the traffic in that alley. The proposed development would require a lot of amendment, a lot of changes. So the discussion was that this is a large big ask about changing the designation, changing the zone, closure. So this isn't just like one little partial thing that we're asking for. This is big. And the Commission did ask how does this fit? The old Lakeview, the old 33 is designated as R1 as a residential. And yes, in some portion of the OCP speaks, but it's largely speaks, well, it doesn't speak directly to this kind of development, but it does speaks in a general sense of this is too big, that doesn't fit in this area. And especially too, when you're looking at altering and moving and altering the alteration of the house heritage features. This was the biggest issue, and the issue was about moving the house. There were some concerns from the Planning Commission, Commissioner asking that this development, this proposal was taking, why it took this long. The proposal was taking very long to get to where we are. I believe the administration did give enough time to the proponent or the applicant to design, redesign. So it wasn't just like move on, or because people were frustrated about making sure that this moves forward. As the Planning Commission debated all this, yes, they were reading the people that are for, against, but we need to look at the neighborhood of Lakeview. The old Lakeview is designed family, single, heritage, and this is what the main concerns with the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission decided to vote unanimous because this doesn't fit this part of Lakeview, this portion of the property, and they voted unanimously to agree with the recommendation of the administration. And so, Mayor Masters, Planning Commission seeks concurrence. And maybe if Ms. Harlak would like to jump in to kind of give a little more higher overview of what we're dealing with, I'll be appreciated. Thank you.
Ms. Harlak?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So as Councillor Fundura outlined, there is a number of applications to accommodate this development proposal. An amendment to the Heritage Designation Bylaw for the property to remove specific references to the statements of significance. A rezoning application to rezone the property to a contract zone to allow the development and partial closure of Hill Avenue to accommodate the development. In evaluation and going through the process from a heritage perspective, administration does not believe that it aligns with the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada. which is the document that is used to evaluate changes to historic places. The standards and guidelines recommend that changes to a historic place should take an approach of minimal intervention and that a future intended use of the building should fit its structure rather than adapting the structure to fit its use. In the administration's opinion, the changes to the historic place are extensive and compromise the historical integrity and character-defining elements of the building. The key concerns are outlined in the report that you have before you, and we can speak to those in details when we respond to questions. From a city planning perspective, the degree of intensification that is proposed is not supported by the official community plan from our perspective. The OCP suggests that higher density intensification should be directed to specific areas such as urban corridors in the city center or intensification areas which are outlined in the growth plan. Furthermore, any intensification that may be accommodated on the site should be compatible with the built form within the area. The report identifies that the proposed floor area, front yard setback, and building height will contrast the existing character of the neighborhood. It should be noted that this area is currently zoned R1, residential detached zone, and has the residential infill overlay that is applied to this area. So the R1 zone does limit residential uses to detached buildings, and the RID overlay intends to ensure that the new infill development is sensitive to the existing context, reducing some development standards. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that that council has regarding our evaluation of the proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Hawryluk. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. I have a question for administration as well as some comments. Could you comment on the extent to which you worked with the applicant to bring his complex project in alignment with existing bylaws, the OCP, and so on?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So we worked with Mr. Leon like we would with any other applicant. There was a consultation about, pre-consultation about what he was looking at doing, where we indicated at that point, we told them that the proposal would require all of these different applications in order to see it come to fruition. So when they brought it in, we worked with Mr. Leon. We did do the public consultation and tried to work with within the parameters. And we did outline early on in October that there was concerns with respect to the density and the concerns around the heritage. At that point, as Mr. Leon indicated today, there is some, from his perspective, financial situation which warrants, in his perspective, a need to look at the higher density. And so at that point, it was felt that there was not going to be movement from the 16, although Mr. Leon has now said that he would move down to the 13. But even at that, we weren't supportive, and we gave Mr. Leon the option to withdraw the application, to rework it, or to proceed. And the decision was to proceed to council with this proposal.
Thank you. Through the chair, can administration please elaborate on the extent to which this proposal does not align with our commitment to heritage? It has received heritage designation. Just want a bit more detail there as to why his reconstruction proposal does not align with existing bylaws in that respect.
Through you, Mayor Masters, I might ask Ms. Hill to go through the details on the heritage analysis that was undertaken.
Ms. Hill?
Through you, Mayor Masters. We did do a detailed heritage analysis of the proposal, and it's important to note that each of these proposals as they come forward is unique, and what we have to look at are the specifics of the property and the character defining elements that are defined in the bylaw. And so in this case, there were three major concerns that were identified. The relocation of the property on the lot, which impacts the setback that is noted in the character defining elements, the impact to the roof lines, and the proposed addition. And the standards and guidelines go into specifics on each of those items.
Okay, thank you. Can you elaborate further also, not regarding heritage, but the concerns residents raised regarding traffic and parking and vehicles and so on?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So there was concerns with respect to alleys that were brought up by the residents in the neighborhood. We did look at it from a traffic perspective, and the amount of traffic that would be generated from this proposed development wasn't deemed, it was deemed to be satisfactory for that alley. So from that perspective, we didn't really have the concerns. From that perspective, the applicant was providing underground parking and a number of parking stalls that would have exceeded the requirements, because our requirements would be 1 stall per unit. So from that perspective, that wasn't an issue from our evaluation. I'm not sure if Mr. Searle has anything else to add.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the only other thing that I would add would be that we would see most traffic being directed right to Hill Avenue and not, for the most part, utilizing the portion of the balance of the lane, although that is a possibility. But we would see most trips just going right out onto Hill and accessing it from Hill.
Okay, thank you. Just by way of conclusion, a couple of remarks. By itself, I think, the proposal does look quite aesthetically pleasing. If you separate from the location from where it's being proposed, I can think of many areas in Lakeview and elsewhere where I think this would be more appropriate. I think what's important about the comments made and the report is that infill and densification isn't just for infill and densification's sake. There are appropriate places for it. I think of 13th as an example. This doesn't seem to fit the bill. That said, I'm not convinced by the claims that somehow property values in the area are going to be negatively affected. I haven't seen a proposal yet that hasn't made that remark. I certainly won't be making a decision based on that. I want to see infill and intensification, but given what we've heard and what the report reads, this isn't an appropriate development for this space, and I think it is an act of economic desperation as to why we're seeing this come forward. Other than the fact that this is actually quite a nice project overall. That said, if we look at administration's recommendation, all 3 are denial. That was unanimously accepted at planning. That is not a common occurrence. In addition to the weight of local feedback, previous decisions on heritage regarding this property, and the fact that the applicant here should have known what he was getting into when he purchased this property. We've been down this road before. So weighing these 2 considerations, the project by itself, as well as administration's recommendation, I think both admin and planning commission made the right decision in their outcomes in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Stadenchuk.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Masters. Through you, Mayor Masters, I have a question regarding an independent, independent examination of the house. The provincial Heritage Review Board did suggest that. So was there, and there's been a lot of contradictory information given. I mean, I was told that the roof was replaced in 2010 and 11 and 12, except for one area which would require minor improvements. And then we have the applicant saying that it's at the end of its lifespan. So there's been a lot of and whether the foundation is solid or not. I understand one of the previous owners installed steel reinforcement for the foundation. So there's been a lot of contradictory information. So was there an independent assessment of that property? Through you.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So there was in earlier this year, the applicant did consent for the city to undertake a third-party building inspection. And it was found that with respect to the roof, that there was the damage observed in the original Admirable Home inspection report that was submitted in 2018 by the applicant. So it does suggest that it is approaching the end of its life and needs to have that. So we will be following up with the applicant on the report and what's needed. Part of the issues when the original applications came forward. There was a lot of information, but we do have the original building inspection report that was produced by the applicant at that time, and now we have this report.
Have we, I guess through you, Madam Chair, has the city ever approved an application that's considered a heritage property that would require this kind of modification before? Has there ever been a proposal like this before?
Through you, Mayor Masters, well, we did, it's from a residential perspective.
Yes.
I might ask Ms. Hill, I don't think I could say, from my knowledge, not to this extent, but there has been other heritage buildings where there has been significant additions. The College Avenue campus is a good example, where to preserve and to make the building more useful, there was a large addition added, and then the renovation. From the residential, I might ask Ms. Hill to comment on that.
Through you, Mayor Masters, I don't think there's one that specifically lines up on all of these elements, as Ms. Horlock has indicated. The Viterra building is another commercial example that we would use, where there's been both an addition and restoration of the existing building. And there are often applications for additions and changes that will support the longevity of the structure, and so there is a need to apply some flexibility when looking at these applications and reviewing the changes. In terms of this particular proposal, we've noted that it's one of the more complex that we've ever had to review.
Okay, thank you for that. I did read the report from administration. And I thought that it was very well written and very well argued. I do support the recommendations that administration made, as well as the Regina Planning Commission. I really think this is a beautiful home that needs to be restored, that needs to be preserved, and that the current proposal just does not meet the requirements. It requires too many amendments, as has been pointed out by many, to make it go forward, and it's just not between the zoning, the heritage property, there's just too many factors here, and so I will be supporting the recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Councillor Stadenchuk. Councillor LeBlanc.
Yes, thank you through you, Madam Chair. To administration, I'm just looking for some clarification or direction on how to interpret the data we've got today. So to overly simplify, if it were true that, all Lakeview residents we heard from were opposed to this development and everybody else spread throughout the city was in favor, can you provide some direction on whether our heritage designation and so on tells us what we ought to do in that circumstance? So said another way, would it be appropriate in your view for council to give more weight to what neighbors say than to what those on the other side of the city say about this proposal?
Ms. Harlock?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Masters. So we do acknowledge that immediate neighbors are impacted more significantly than someone, let's say, on the other side of the city. That's why through the Planning and Development Act, we do have requirements to notify the immediate residents. So I think from a council and an administrative perspective, when we're analyzing that, we do look at the locations and those impacts, but we try and obviously use an unbiased approach when we're doing the evaluation on looking at the policies that we have at hand and then the comments that are coming forward. So as an instance, the immediate neighbors have concerns about the alley. Our analysis is that, for instance, the traffic would not have the same impact. So we do take those different things into consideration, but definitely the immediate and adjacent neighbors are more impacted.
Thank Thank you for that. And then just one follow-up clarification from a response I'd received from the Heritage Regina delegate. So I heard Heritage Regina's delegate to say that heritage designation doesn't solely or disproportionately attach to high-value homes, that homes of any market value might be designated as heritage property, and I take it, therefore, continuing to protect those homes doesn't amount to protecting the homes of wealthy folks. I'm just wondering if you can provide any insight on, for example, the average market value of a heritage designated home, or, for example, whether you're aware of any heritage designated homes that would have a market value of less than $300,000, for example.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do have heritage properties, not just in this strip. So there is a varying price range with different heritage properties, but I might ask Ms. Hill if she knows the average.
Through you, Mayor Masters, we don't have anything as precise as an average, but certainly that there is a range and direction within the cultural plan to continue to explore that range and ensure that there's a variety of properties and stories that are told by those properties being preserved. One of the pieces of this work that we are looking at over the next few months is the fact that there are investments that are required to maintain these properties, and those can sometimes be out of the reach of some homeowners, and so then our incentive policies come into play, and looking at continuing to make sure that those are aligned to the needs of property owners.
Great, thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. My first question is through the mayor. Mr. Lean has stated that he has now paid his 2020 property taxes. Can someone in administration confirm if that's the case?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I might ask Ms. Bryden.
Good afternoon, through you, Madam Mayor. So at this point in time, the taxes on the account are still showing as outstanding. And if a payment was made yesterday or today, it probably would take a day or two to actually be processed through to the property account.
Okay, thank you. Also on that note, so my understanding of this process is that there are multiple notices sent out prior to publication in the newspaper, so that if there was an error with payments, the bank should have been notified multiple times, or whoever would have been notified multiple times that no payments had been made. Is that accurate?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, so any property taxes that remain outstanding after the payment deadline were provided, those property owners were provided with reminder notices. There were 2 reminder notices that would have gone out in 2020 after the property tax payment deadline, as well as a notice in January that would have indicated the amount outstanding, and those would have gone to the property owners.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to a different point now. I did want to state that although we've heard a mixture today of those in favor or opposed to this planned development, at the Regina Planning Commission meeting, all of the submissions that we received that day were opposed to this development, and we've seen the numbers of total submissions received by the city. As a councillor, the vast majority of responses that I've received from residents are opposed to this development. And I also just wanted to say that I will be supporting the recommendations from administration and the Planning Commission. There are several reasons why, and many of these have been covered by other delegations. I did want to emphasize a couple of them. First, I would like to thank administration for all their work with this application. And they have made it clear that they do not support any application submitted regarding this proposal. They've spent numerous hours working with the applicant and I think their recommendations regarding this situation should be given serious weight. Others have touched on this next point, but the number of adjustments to existing policy requested for this development is a major red flag. The applicant wants changes to the heritage designation bylaw, and I think it's important to note that some of those changes were removing components that the applicant doesn't plan to save. Amendments would be required to the Regina zoning bylaw and a closure of a portion of the hill right-of-way. I'd like us to consider for a second that if developments regularly required multiple amendments like this to city policy, the implications of that, and if that's a precedent that we would want to entertain setting. I think that's all that I have. Thank you.
Apologies, Councillor Zakiniak. Was there a question at the end that you wanted Ms. Harlech to address? No, you're good. Thank you so much. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, fellow councillors. Approval of Mr. Lean's proposal would drive a stake through the heart of our heritage bylaw, which is meant to protect our past. It would distort our zoning bylaw, which is meant to protect neighborhoods. These are the kinds of conclusions that can be drawn from the Provincial Heritage Board's indication that this proposal did not meet heritage standards. Kind of conclusion which is one can draw from the very carefully reasoned and useful report by the city's administration. The kind of conclusions which could be drawn from the unanimous approval of the Regina Planning, or the unanimous disapproval of the Regina Planning Commission of the proposal. I want to also note that both Mr. Keith and Ms. Schmidt, both with long expertise in heritage restoration, indicated that there were other options for this property, options which would make a better fit to preserve heritage and to preserve zoning. One of those options, Mr. Lean himself suggested the option of selling the property. At a higher level, our city's heritage cradles the soul of our city. Any city that ignores its heritage has no future. Without heritage, our community and our neighborhoods would be seriously diminished. We have a duty to protect that heritage, not only for all of our citizens today, but for all of tomorrow's citizens and future generations. And those are the reasons why I'll support the recommendation to deny this proposal. And I'd ask fellow councillors to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Seeing no one else, I'll be the last to speak. What's that? Oh, you'll close it. Do you want to close it off? I'll speak first then. I would like some clarification. I apologize. Councillor Bresciani, you'd like to go? Sorry, Councillor Bresciani, you're on mute.
Thank you. To you, Madam Mayor, just a couple of questions for administration. You know, this really puts council in a hard spot, and I'll tell you why. We, as a council, listened, and I know many councillors weren't there for the first piece, but we heard, and we talked about the bones of this building, of this home, and it was very unclear regarding our heritage. If we had two people come forward. We had one that said it's going to be, you know, in the millions of dollars to fix this up, and then we had one that's going to be, you know, around the 300,000 or in the lower hundreds for sure to to do some work on it, depending on how much work wanted to be done. At the end of the day, the question is about, is this a heritage building and does it have the bones to still be a home? If it doesn't, similar to the bag shell, then it's gone. But if it doesn't, and that's where I think today we sit. I'm going to ask administration, where are we in this heritage to figure this out for moving forward? Because what are the next steps here? Through you, Madam Mayor.
Ms. Harlock?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Masters. So we did recognize that there was discrepancies of information in the past. We did recommend that we get a report done, but that was not approved by council. So we are bringing amendments forward to council to address these types of things where we do get a third-party report done prior to any designation, so that council has a third-party understanding of what really is happening with the house. So that's coming forward here in March. We're looking at the architectural guidelines for the crescents, and then we are doing also, how do we preemptively, if they're not on the, if buildings or structures are not on the inventory right now, how do we proactively get those on there if they're not on there? And then of course, Ms. Hill's area is working to do all of the assessments. We're also in the midst of reviewing our whole policy with respect to the incentive program. And so that's starting, and we'll be coming to council in April, doing public consultation, which will include Heritage Regina, the public, Heritage Saskatchewan, etc., with policy amendments, recommendations coming in Q3 of this year. We've learned a lot from this process. In the past, we haven't designated against a property owner's will only in 2 other circumstances that we know of. And I think what we've learned is that we do have some work on the policy side to ensure that not only potential property owners that are going to be designated, but council and ourselves have clear policies in place so that everybody knows the rules around this and the processes.
Thank you for that. Is there a question that when someone does come forward to the city, like Mr. Lean did, is the first question, do you want to remain as a home, keep it as a home, or are you, as he is a developer, are you wanting to see this as somewhat of a more of a development? Is that ever clear right at the very beginning? To you, Madam Mayor?
Through you, Mayor Masters. I'd say that when someone comes forward and they're looking at a property like this, if it hasn't been evaluated, you know, we always give the idea that, well, we have to go through the evaluation process, and that was what was told to Mr. Lean, and that there was a high probability that these things could be designated based on our evaluation. To your specific question, sometimes people do come forward and indicate that yes, they want to. I think in this case, as Ms. Hill said, this is probably the biggest one that we've ever seen. I don't recall in my tenure here at the city where we have seen some of this nature from a residential standpoint. Most of these buildings are, if they're not commercial, from the residential, they are typically remaining as the single family or as a dwelling, a residential, or they're being converted as per the policies that we have to some sort of commercial use.
Okay. Mayor Master, I'll just make a comment. You know, as we as a council have to make these tough decisions, one of the biggest things, and I think the first question here is, it's about heritage. I did have the opportunity to go through the home. People were still living in the home. It was livable. They were living there, and yes, there was a few bends here and there, but they were sad to see that this home would be somewhat torn down or something else different there. So, but I also would say this is that we know there's always going to be pushback from any community when we're going to be putting any kind of high density. I think we all see that in proposals coming forward. So we have to balance out, you know, the neighborhood as well. I think if we would have had a better plan going forward with our heritage, I know we have stressed out the community, the neighbors. I've heard don't live in that area, but I've heard from many that are adjacent and do back it, that they are afraid that this is going to be changing their neighborhood. They're going to have someone now peering into their backyard, which changes changes the whole feel of their neighborhood. But at the first question for us as council is this still deemed a heritage, and is it savable? And I think that's the question here today. And for me, again, that to me that's the end of the day. It's not about the next development that happens. Is this heritage, and is it something that we want to see our heritage kept? Absolutely. And is this home, does it still have the bones to do so? If people are still living in the home, I would say it does. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Shaw?
No, I've said everything I had to say. I mean, moving forward, that these problems won't arise again if we get some better administration around, deeming what's heritage and what's not. For me, it's been tough because I'm a new councillor trying to see, what's right in the history and stuff. But I don't support this. I don't feel that it was right. I think administration did a very good job at doing their job. This has just gone on for way too long, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I'll get to my questions. When did these 5 applications contained within this request, what is the original date of the 5 applications?
Through you, Mayor Masters, it was July.
Of 2020?
Yes. Or for these applications, yes.
When was the application for demolition?
That was in 2019. Or, pardon me, 2018.
2018. Took a while for the heritage, I understand. I'm going to echo some of the comments of Councillor Bresciani in terms of the difficulty with which this put council in. To say that I'm frustrated is an understatement. And at the core of it, it would seem to be, once again, that we continue to speak to an OCP as being a guiding principle, but the OCP is only effective with updated neighborhood plans. I would love to defend the city as it relates to the comments made by one of the delegations about our being 15 to 20 years behind. And upon researching the idea and notion of intensification, sure enough, the doctoral student wrote one for the city of Vancouver in 1992, a little bit longer than that. It is the job of the city to understand the issues and characteristics, patterns in a neighborhood. The city has to understand what is happening in an area in order to discover what may work as it comes to intensification. My issue with the timing of the application and being here at the end of February in 2021 is that there is no winner here. We have an entire community who is upset, rightfully so. We have an individual who bought a home and was looking to do something different. And if the recommendations as presented go forward, he's going to be not winning either. And we have a heritage policy under review, which was changed in 2017. I only have one vote here, but I'm not interested in heritage policies coming forward that are split apart. I'd rather see it all together as a package. Intensification only works. The intensification on its own is not a good thing. Just because it exists doesn't mean there's social benefit from it. I do not accept that 16 units on Albert Street in Regina is Regina's salvation. Nor do I accept that someone makes an application and 9 months later comes before council and creates an enormous amount of divisiveness in our community, wastes money and time. So we have some work to do, it would seem, on both intensification as it relates to conversion of infill. Our heritage policy, clearly. There was an enormous amount of work that went into this final document, and I do appreciate that. There was an enormous amount of work put in by private residents, by Heritage Regina, and by Mr. Carmen Lean, and anyone supporting his this process is unacceptable. That's going to be my final statement. Mr. Fundura, please close off the report.
Okay, you got me on. Thank you, Mayor Masters. This has been a very difficult journey. It's like you said, look at the date, 2018. I will ask a question. The question was posed, and the applicant, Mr. Leon, answered that he did not know that the house was either on a heritage holding or had any kind of heritage qualities or any kind of heritage features with it. He claims that he did not know when he purchased the house. Can I hear that through you, Mayor Masters?
Through you, Mayor Masters. Mr. Lean was aware that it was on the heritage inventory bylaw. It was on the bylaw, the inventory bylaw. Heritage holding list, which was a bylaw, which we changed after to the inventory. But at the time of purchase, it was on the bylaw.
Okay, so to you, Mayor Master, the reason I'm asking that, this is the second time I've heard the claim of he didn't know that this was on a heritage holding. So this were, then Mr. Leon mentioned talking about, then he would have done something different. So I just want to clarify this to make sure that city had its on a holding list. It was there. Anyone can find it. You can see it. It was a knowledge. So that doesn't lie with or doesn't sit with saying, "Oh, I didn't know. I could have done different." So that's been the question with a comment. And then again, as this project, as he called it, is moving forward, first attempt, and as Councilor Russian said, she said the inside of the house was livable. The first application came in for demolition. So right after get-go, there was no interest in saving the property. It was there to demolish it, and that's where everything triggered, and that's where we are today. And at the Planning Commission, there was discussion about what did it took so long, and that's what happened. Is when something like this goes on, the demo permit triggers the evaluation, and this is where we started. And so if any questions, any comments being made by anyone, that's what happened, and this is where we are here today. It wasn't like someone didn't know, we didn't know, we weren't telling what it is. So I mean, I can see the divisiveness of the you might say community about the heritage. The old Lakeview, if you look at it, is a beautiful part of the city, and I do understand that individuals when they buy into that area, they're buying in for that purpose. The taxes are higher, lots are bigger, and the integrity. And I know that we need to. And we are working on it. I believe that we need to up the ante on the heritage, and we need to get it. We have some work to do. We've done a good job. Don't take me wrong, but we need some work some work needs to be done. As Mayor Masters mentioned about our policies and our neighborhood, we need to get into our neighborhoods. We talked about that. Our first point of it, we have all different kind of things that happen. Neighborhood. I believe we need to get into neighborhood first, and then work way out of that one. This is unfortunate, and the comments I'm making is that there is a policy on the bylaw that if this goes, let's say, doesn't get approved, the house will not be left to fall apart. City does have, if I'm correct, so I'm going to ask the question. City does have the ability to work with the owner, whoever it is, to make sure that the property stays in the shape it is without falling apart. Am I correct? To you, Madam Mayor Masters?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So with regards to the maintenance of the property, it is a heritage property, and it will be required to be maintained as per the Act, and we'll work with the applicant. As I indicated, we do have the report that was commissioned in cooperation with Mr. Leon on the property, and we'll proceed to work with him to ensure that the property is preserved.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Mayor Masters, everyone said their piece. I'm good with it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fundura. Mr. City Clerk, please call the vote.
Thank you. I will begin with Councillor Fundura, please.
I'm in favor of the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli has left the meeting for the benefit of those watching. Councillor Mold is also absent from the meeting. Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Carries 9-2, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved, Hawkins.
Thank you, sir. Seconder? We are done for the day. Have a good night, folks.
Yeah, I read the absent. I think it's on the media. It's 9-0. I read the wrong call.
Hi, how was that?